Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, November 2nd, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. It's Casual Friday, folks. Nothing casual about this week. I may be wearing a soft-collared shirt, but you got to get out there and get your friends, and maybe even just this week, reach out to your enemies and get them to vote. Not necessarily your political enemies. I'm just saying like your personal, people you don't like, but are similarly situated in terms of their politics. Get them to vote. And joining us this week, Digby from the blog Hullabaloo. Also on the program today, Andy Kindler from andykindler.com and Mind Spiral and
Thought Spiral.
Thought Spiral. The witches of Waverly Place. I can't remember that show, but I saw him on it when Milo was a kid. Also on the program today, with midterm days away, will Trump's racism, xenophobia, and anti-immigrant pitch carry the day? Another way of putting that is just how racist are the Republicans. Meanwhile, right-wing attempt to smear Robert Mueller fails catastrophically. And has Mueller already subpoenaed Donald Trump? Google workers walk out over sexual harassment, and the Trump administration cancels a program to fight domestic terrorism. Meanwhile, in a tight Senate race in Arizona, the Green Party candidate endorses the Democrat. And revealed, the Jaworski report shows how Nixon was about to be indicted by a grand jury before he resigned. Interesting story as to why that came out now.
Love history.
Fed says reduced immigration could slow the U.S. economy, and a George W. Bush-appointed federal judge allows the continuance of the North Dakota Native American vote disenfranchisement campaign. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. It is November 2nd, as you are undoubtedly aware. What you may not be aware of is something that I was not aware of until Kyle, the guy who made this show possible, literally made this show possible. I think I've told the story a million times, but here is 1,000,001. I was at Netroots Nation. It must have been the summer of 2010. After Air America imploded in the fall of 2009, Marin had launched WTF, I think. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was thinking about going back into show business, but I couldn't swallow pitching another dumb sitcom. And the last one I had pitched, CBS, they said they were going to buy it. They were going to make a, not a full pilot, but what do they call it? Presentations, or a half pilot, which I would have directed, written, and then the writer's strike hit. I ended up writing that script for HBO. So I was about 6 months out from the last script I had written, and I was like, I can't bring myself to go and pitch a show. I just couldn't. Too dumb, the stuff at that time. And I had been shooting some videos. I think That's Bullshit. And this guy comes up to me at Netroots Nation. He says, I'm Kyle. I'm like, Kyle, right. I remember you used to IM us. And he was the one who also had reserved AdNags, which became the secret blog of Adam Nagorny in 2004, which I and a couple other folks, I think Kyle maybe a little bit as well, populated as a way of tormenting him back when blogs were something that were, magical. And we made this blog as if Nagorny thought it was his own private blog that he was just writing to his fellow reporters. And it was a little bit catty. Anyways, Kyle said, you should do a podcast. And I said, well, I would, but I really, one of the things I really like about doing radio is taking phone calls, and I wouldn't be able to do that. And he goes, oh, I can set that up for you. I was like, well, really? And he goes, yeah, I'll set up the website for you too. And I'll help you, just make the podcast. All you got to do is
to help with connectivity.
Yeah, exactly. He'll help with connectivity. And I'll just help you. And all you need to do is, figure out how to actually get microphones and stuff like that. And I said, well, I lifted half the stuff from Air America anyway. So, I have that sitting in a box. And so the show was born. The first show was 8 years ago tomorrow on a Wednesday, November 3rd. It was it was basically a soft launch. I know even in the show description I'm looking at now, this was the show description to the Majority Report with Sam Seder on Wednesday, November 3rd, 2010. Now, of course, I had been doing this, the first Majority Report was in February sometime in 2003 on The Best Show with Tom Sharpling, who tweeted out something really disgusting today about Andy Kindler's appearance. But we'll talk about that later. But meanwhile, this was the show description. I will read it to you. Sounds pretty exciting. Shows will be a bit sporadic for the next week or two as we organize ourselves, but when they happen, they will happen at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Podcasts will be available shortly. More info soon. That was the description of the show.
Under promise and over deliver.
Exactly. And then on Thursday, the 4th, things really picked up. On today's show, what's next for Democrats and George W. Bush? Torture, criminal, and dimwit. Casual Friday we just did a replay of the original, the first Majority Report on Air America. And then, let's see. Oh, nothing too, we didn't really get into show descriptions until a couple of months. But, so happy birthday to us.
It's your birthday. Happy birthday. It's your birthday.
We're not going to get hit for rights.
Nope, this is public domain.
Public domain. There we go. There you go, folks. Happy birthday to all of you. I want to say thank you to our members. I don't thank our members enough, but it's not because I'm not grateful. It's just I'm, I guess, rude and out of touch. But I want to thank our members. I think we started doing members sometime in February of 2011, and a lot of longtime listeners stepped up and made it possible to do this show. And at that time, too, I want to thank Dorsey and Evan. Dorsey, who I think now still works at BuzzFeed, just came to me and he was like, I'll help you set up the show. I'm like, I don't know how much I can pay you. He said, I don't care. He just did it. And so it's our members who make this show possible. And I am very grateful for the opportunity. And, you know, it can be trying at times, but it's a very gratifying way to make a living. Excuse me. And someday I'll be more professional about coughing into a microphone. Play some music quick while I drink.
Happy birthday to you.
I'm not getting choked up. I'm just, for whatever reason, something went down the wrong pipe. So there's an interesting dynamic that's going on. What's that? Yeah, some water would be great. Thank you. Our crew has got really professional, too. There's an interesting dynamic that is going on with this election. Excuse me. And that is, how much is racism going to sell across the board? And we'll talk more about this with Digby. But here is a student going and challenging the Mike Pence, not Mike Pence, excuse me, could have been Mike Pence, but Steve King, the Iowa congressman, who has basically run on and been a lightning rod for white nationalism in this country. And he has gotten more explicit over the past couple of years, I think. And, of course, he feels more comfortable doing so now in the age of Trump because Donald Trump is a white nationalist. And so here a student goes and asks Steve King at, I guess I'm not exactly sure if this was a press conference or
a candidate forum.
A candidate forum. Steve King could see this guy walking in. He was wearing flannel. How do you distinguish yourself from the white nationalists who shot up this synagogue in Pittsburgh, killed 11 people because he was afraid of the immigrant hordes who were being, who were about to invade this country, being prodded on by the Jews? How do you distinguish yourself, your ideology from his? I mean, it's quite evident that Steve King has not shot up a temple full of Jews. He's a congressman. But how do you distinguish your ideology, he's asked. And I guess Steve King didn't feel comfortable answering the question.
Dead. And the terrorist who committed this crime, he was quoted as saying, "They bring invaders in that kill our people. I can't sit back and watch our people get slaughtered." You, Steve King, have been quoted as saying, "We can't restore our civilization with other people's babies." You and the shooter both share an ideology that is fundamentally anti-immigration.
Do not associate me with that shooter. I knew you were an ambusher when you walked in the room, but there's no basis for that, and you get no question, you get no answer.
I was about to ask you what distinguishes your ideology.
We don't play these games here in Iowa.
I was about to ask you what distinguishes your ideology.
You crossed the line. It's not tolerable to accuse me to be associated with a guy that shot 11 people in Pittsburgh. I am a person who has stood with Israel from the beginning. That the length of that nation is the length of my life.
I was about to
say, and I've been with them all
immigration.
along, and I will not answer your question, and I'll not listen to another word from you.
If you don't have a white supremacist worldview, then why did you travel to Austria and meet with a white supremacist organization?
I think he's given his answer. I think that his answer is his answer. Yes.
But do you identify as a white supremacist?
Sir, stop it.
Then why did you meet with the white supremacist organization in Austria?
They're done. I would ask whoever is guarding this door to lead this man out of the room.
Yeah.
I live and work in the 4th District. My wife lives and works in the 4th District.
There you go. Steve King traveled, was it to Poland to visit, I think it was Dachau. Maybe it was Auschwitz. I'm not sure. And then also, just to get the other side, met with a Holocaust denier. Just to, fair and balanced. And uncomfortable, though, describing why his or how his ideology is any different from the one that led that shooter to his kill those people. This is that's a different one, right? That's Steve Knight. So there it is. Well, I guess we'll know if King gets reelected. He is in a very tight race with a pretty progressive guy. And there is, the Republican Party has expressed, at least some people in the Republican Party have expressed a little uncomfortability with just how outwardly fascist Steve King is. So there's a slight movement there. But it also could be the case that they need to redeploy some of their assets in other races. So this is a good way to sort of justify not saving Steve King's seat. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Digby will be joining us to talk about what's happening out there 3 business days before the election. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is Casual Friday. And, we've had a recent spate of musically talented people providing all sorts of fare for just a moment like this.
Are you ready for some Digby? Yeah. Are you ready for some Digby? Digby, 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 yeah.
There you go. Well, it's a little AM talk radio-y from like 1971, I think. Heather Parton, Digby, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. AM radio 1971 is probably just perfect for me, actually.
I have to say that it reminds me of my early youth. It's around that time I started recording stuff off of radio with like one of those Panasonic. Do you remember one of those like molded, almost look like one piece of plastic cassette players.
Oh yeah, I think I had one of those actually.
Yeah, all the
because
cool kids
cassettes
did.
were kind of cool, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they
of
were
course.
the big new thing. I mean, that was exciting. Small, you know.
No more 8
We were
tracks.
Yeah. Oh well. You know what? I never had an 8-track, and I have to say, I mean, I am of the age that should have, but you know, I was too cool for that. I went directly from vinyl to cassettes. That's how forward thinking I was.
All right. Well, okay, that's pretty impressive. All right, let's get to. I think my folks had the 8 tracks. I probably just went to cassettes too. So, Digby, let's start with this because it seems to me there's a fascinating dynamic that's happening in terms of these House races, right? And let's just and folks are going to hear this refrain, I think, multiple times going forward, but. The Democrats need 23 seats. There are, and my numbers are a little bit loosey-goosey here, but about 15 of these seats or so are, districts that Clinton won, but, suburban Republican voters on some level or with a propensity to vote Republican. They have a Republican congressperson, and those are races that seem to be more of a lock for the Democrat. Lock may be too strong of a word, but certainly Democrats up. And then there's another 24, maybe even more, 30 seats that are, it's nobody can call. It's too close. And those tend to be ones where it's not as suburban. Maybe the districts are not as wealthy. And it seems like Trump is focusing on those. And because they also sort of track a little bit more with the red states where there are Senate races that Trump wants to hold. Is that your sense? And what do you think about the idea of the way that they're going about trying to salvage that seems to be to just go all in racist, quasi-fascist. Maybe not quasi.
But yeah, not so quasi at this point. But yeah, I think you're right. I think I think most of the analysts sort of see that Trump, and from what I'm reading, and there was an article in Vanity Fair this week that was kind of interesting where they were quoting Trump's pollster, who I think is his name Tony Fabricio? I'm sorry if I've got that name wrong. Fabrio or Fabricio, something like that. Anyway, he had sort of convinced Trump that there was that they had a chance to take back the House. And the article sort of implied that they were kind of blowing smoke at Trump, right? Kind of making him feel better because they sort of knew that the chances were pretty bad even at this point, which was maybe a month ago. So Trump was all excited and very happy and feeling really motivated, and he was out there really pushing, doing his rallies and going up against the press and being very, doing his thing. And then these two horrible events happened last week. Hard to believe it was just last week. I mean, when you think about it, Pittsburgh, it hadn't even been a week since that happened, and yet, life comes at you fast in the Trump era. But when that happened, he got very upset and about his momentum, which he mentioned last night in a rally again, that, it really ruined his momentum, ruined his plans, and that was really upsetting. And they came back to him and said, hey, look, the House is gone. And I think some of that was probably his people sort of saying, look, this is the way to sort of, break it to him that the House isn't going to happen. So basically, I think what you're talking about with his strategy, where he's going, it's into these red states where they think they can hold the Senate and maybe some of those seats that are within that sort of region and area where he'll get a lot of coverage and maybe he can help out some of those people. Now, I read an interesting quote the other day, or read an interesting sort of analysis that Trump had down when he went to Texas to stump for Cruz, and he had that big rally in Houston. The Cruz people think he hurt them because the polls started to move up for Beto O'Rourke after he came. So, even in Texas, maybe Trump is starting to get a little toxic, which I found kind of interesting. But, he's doing his thing. I mean, he's going out there, and yes, his strategy entirely is to just double down as hardcore as he can on the anti-immigrant, xenophobic, anti-media, every kind of harsh, ugly, sort of strategy that he thinks got him where he is. I mean, he said that in this interview with Axios, which I guess is going to premiere this weekend on HBO. They published some excerpts from it, and he just said, well, this is what people want from me, and it's my only way of fighting back. This is why I won. And I think that says it all for him. I mean, I think that's the, he just has a very, very limited sort of understanding of politics. And it's, I won because, I'm a nasty bastard and I fight back, and, everybody hates the media. And it doesn't really get any more complicated than that. The problem is that, Trump had you hate to say it's an opportunity, but there was a moment that he could have potentially reached out to some of those suburban voters that you were talking about at first, the people who they think are probably gone, and some of these people who, may have been in, districts that Hillary won, or maybe some of these, white suburban women who have been Republicans their whole lives, but now they're voting Democratic. They say they are in this election. Because after those two tragedies last week, he could have, and apparently his staff approached him and said, we should do an Oval Office speech where you talk about unity and bringing the country together. And everybody would, think about it. People would have been shocked, kind of like, geez, Trump doesn't do this, and if he could have pulled it off and acted it halfway decently, who knows? Maybe some of those people, or some of the independents who lean Republican, could have gone, well, maybe Trump's not so bad, when the chips are down, he can come through, and he's not quite the horrible jerk that we thought he was.
Certainly, there would be a lot of media people who would have said, like, this is the day he really, really became president.
He made the pivot.
Right? I mean, honestly, we know that would have happened. And
yeah, of course.
I mean, he's just...
Of course, they yearn for it.
He's not constitutionally capable of it. No. And I wonder... I mean, here's the thing. I don't know that he's wrong. Like, that's... I mean, that counter sort of like factual scenario, that may have helped him, but it also may have hurt him. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing about this midterm that I think has the potential to be super, super dark. I mean, aside from, the idea of the Republicans controlling the House and the Senate, the way in which they win, if they were to somehow maintain the House, let's say, the winning in that way would be really disturbing. I mean, let's look. Let's look at this video. And clearly, Trump is all in on this strategy of basically of like a sadistic, I promise you, I will be the guy to oversee the U.S. government shooting, snipers on some type of imaginary wall, shooting would-be asylum seekers, as they try and come approaching the wall. I mean, this is basically what he's going on and doing. It's all a complete straw man, right? We know the caravan, to the extent that there's going to be anybody left in this so-called caravan by the time they reach the Mexico border. They're not going to be here for months. There's no doubt in my mind that we're not going to hear anything about this in 2 weeks unless the Republicans win the House, retain the House. But here is Donald Trump talking about what the plan is.
How do you plan to... Them firing upon any of these people? Could you see...
I hope not. It's the military. I hope there won't be that. But I will tell you this. Anybody throwing stones, rocks, like they did to Mexico and the Mexican military, Mexican police, where they badly hurt police and soldiers of Mexico, we will consider that a firearm. Because there's not much difference when you get hit in the face with a rock, which, as you know, it was very violent a few days ago, very, very violent. That break-in, it was a break-in of a country. They broke into Mexico. And you look at what's happening in Guatemala, just to mention Guatemala, along with El Salvador and Honduras. It's disgraceful that those countries aren't able to stop this, because they should be able to stop it before it starts. And the United States pays them a fortune. And we're looking at not doing that anymore, because why should we be doing that when they do nothing for us?
So now it turns out that the military was not aware of this change in orders, that most of their weapons were not going to be used. Like literally, most of their weapons were going to be under lock and key. Like this is clearly Mattis is saying, okay, we'll send 5,200 military personnel to the border, and they're just going to hang out. Like this is going to be like an R&R situation. But put that aside for a moment. He is calling for the U.S. Army to fire on immigrants in the event that they have rocks in their hands.
Yes, that is what he did. And in fact, he later went on in that same sort of Q&A after his silly speech yesterday. He went on to say that he had told the military to change that order, and that he was telling them consider it a rifle if somebody's throwing a rock at you. Now, I mean, this is obviously, there are a million laws that are going to be in force at this. The idea that, and I don't even know what the thinking in the military is, from what I read yesterday and saw people sort of talking about. They're of different minds within the military about whether or not this operation, what are they calling it? Patriotic Eagle or something? I don't know. It should be called Operation White Supremacy.
Right.
But they're of different minds about whether or not this is a good use of their time, effort, and resources. And it's going to be very, very expensive. It's going to cost billions of dollars. The only thing Trump will ever write a blank check for is the military. The idea that something terrible could happen as a result of this is obvious. Look, I don't want to, digress too far here, but you only have to think about, the Gaza and the West Bank to think about how rock throwing turns into tragedy.
Of course.
Even on our own border in the past, there have been incidents like this with the military back in the late 90s. The military shot they used to send troops to the border. This isn't the first time a president's done this, but it was always under the auspices of trying to stop drug trafficking. Never before has it been to stop a bunch of, ragtag group of mothers and their children at the border. That's just never been done before. But there have been troops there, and there was a terrible incident in the late 90s where a soldier who was deployed on this drug mission accidentally shot a young goat herd, unarmed, Mexican kid who accidentally crossed the border tending his goats. And it was a terrible thing. And, it really made people think twice about whether or not you ever want to do it. Now, George Bush did. He sent a bunch of troops down to the border, 2,000, I think, or maybe it was 6,000. I can't remember, but it was a lot. And it cost billions of dollars. His operation did. So, this gambit isn't new, which is why I think maybe Mattis is going along with it. He's a little more acquiescent than people sort of expected him to be, because it has been done before. But this is a different atmosphere, right? We are in Trump is building people up into a frenzy, and I don't know if he's building U.S. military troops up into a frenzy. He probably is building the Border Patrol up into a frenzy, and I can guarantee you that all these militia guys who are going to come down and, quote, help, he's definitely building them up into a frenzy. So you're setting up a situation for something very tragic to happen. And I really think, and I think maybe he wants that, to be honest.
I think that's very possible. And we should also say, there are greater implications, and we're starting to see more and more of this, right? Bolsonaro elected in Brazil. Now he's moving the embassy to Jerusalem in the Brazilian embassy. And just today, the Nigerian army, which this week shot and killed multiple protesters who were throwing rocks, under investigation. This is their biggest defense. They tweeted out that video that we just played, please watch and make your deductions, essentially saying, look, the president of the United States says if you throw rocks, it's like firing weapons. Therefore, we cannot be held to account for shooting unarmed protesters. And this is, we had been asking for, you and I had been talking about in the lead up to, after to the inauguration, and sort of contemplating what are the implications of foreign policy. This is one of those things. We see this time and time again where, I don't think as citizens, just going about our daily basis, particularly, people who may be a little bit jaded, as, a lot of folks are, we're conscious of that the United States, in many respects, maintained, even though there was times we were certainly hypocritical about it, but maintained some type of normative values in the world that had some type of restraining impact on other governments around the world. And we're seeing what happens when we sort of let go of those, where we create a little bit of slack in those type of normative values.
Oh, a lot of slack. I mean, I would say it was a lurch. It was kind of an abrupt change. I think you and I have talked about this a lot. This kind of the scary sort of aspect of this. It's all scary. What he's doing domestically is very scary, but we don't know yet whether or not our institutions have the resilience to be able to resist this. And we'll see on Tuesday our first sign of whether or not it's actually possible. Because the Republican Party, of course, is, they've proved that they are not going to be part of that. They're not, that institution is dead, so we can't really count on them. But maybe the vote will do something anyway to give us hope that we can bring that back. But on an international level, we just do not know what the result and the consequences of this man being president is going to be. It's very, very up in the air. It's unknown, and that is a very scary thing, because as much as we thought, many of us have said for years that, hey, the U.S. being the policeman of the world is not a good position to be in. Being the world's only superpower, blah, 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 that this is, it's putting the country in an immoral position. It empowers, all kinds of terrible consequences around the world. But you don't pair that up with nothing to replace it. I mean, the idea was always, okay, we need to create new institutions. We've got to find new alliances. We've got to build on, some kind of global understanding. You can't just walk away. And that's basically what Trump has done. And not only has he walked away in terms of, giving any kind of respect toward the international order that had been built after World War II, but, he's also just sort of joined the petty tyrant club. He might as well be Duterte, or I think he's going to be a lot like Bolsonaro. I mean, these are the kinds of ugly, petty sort of international relations that lead to wars. I mean, that's the sort of thing that he's doing. And, we have to keep our eyes on that all the time, because we don't know where the chips are going to fall with that. It's very, very dangerous. And here we have him, modeling for the rest of the world, the United States of America, doing things like, saying the new rules of engagement are to shoot at rock throwers. And we're seeing the results instantly in a place like Nigeria. I mean, this is really stunning, extremely dangerous. It's one reason why, the Congress, they can't do a lot, but they do have a voice. And if we do manage to take back the House, and, I guess that there's a long shot that they might take the Senate, unlikely, but you never know. That suddenly there's another force within the United States that can be, use its voice to somehow project out to the world, hey, look, this guy does not have unlimited power. He doesn't, or he shouldn't, but under the Republicans, of course, he has. There's been zero oversight, and if anything, they've been working as his accomplices in the Congress.
I'm not as... I'm not as well. Look, I think it's obviously a Democratic Congress mitigates what Trump does, but in terms of the message sent to the rest of the world, I'm not sure you get the. I don't think there's any takesies backsies on this one. Do you know what I mean? I think like the message to the world is, I just don't know that we ever regain that type of, even the illusion of that type of moral authority. I don't want to overstate, I say that with all the caveats that are involved in that, right? But it just makes it a harder argument for, there's a reason why bin Salman is really going to just be okay in Saudi Arabia in, another 3 or 4 weeks. There's a reason why the business class in Brazil didn't feel too bad about electing an out-and-out fascist. The Nigerian military, they're all getting their justification, and we should also say there's also like domestically, right? Like this stuff, we're watching it with our own eyes. There, all the data points are that there is more racism, hate groups are acting out. Maybe there aren't more racists, but there are more who are crossing the threshold and out of the shadows, as it were. And I don't know how you put that back in the bottle. Like a society can do that, I think, over time, in terms of those racists and xenophobes, if things turn over the next couple of years. But in terms of the rest of the world, like I think once you sort of step down as that, providing that normative value, it seems to me very hard to sort of regain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the most we can hope for, really, I totally agree with you on that. Things are, I hate to say this because it's scary, but, it's not, it shouldn't be too scary, is that things are never going to be the same, okay? I mean, this changed, this was it. And it had been happening for a long time, right? I mean, our democracy's been in trouble for, at least 30 years, probably longer. Our institutions have been, corrupted. I mean, we know all that. We've been watching this happen through our lifetime, that something was wrong, we knew, and this is just sort of the zenith of that, and we're seeing it happen. But that doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be a completely negative, horrific Mad Max replacement, right? I mean, there theoretically could be some kind of new world order put in place that, could actually be better, and be better for the United States. I mean, the United States should not, after this much time, after the war, it made sense for the United States to sort of bear the burden and be the single power that sort of kept the world on an even keel. But that made no sense after a certain time, and certainly after the Soviet Union broke up. So, it's fair to say that something new should be in place, and it's not impossible to believe that something new can be built that is actually good and better than what we had before. But there's no guarantee of that. And with Donald Trump in office, it's impossible to believe, because he's an incompetent imbecile who is, driven by a bunch of primitive emotions, and that's about it. So it's not going to happen with him. And the way that the world looks with these, with these people in power. I mean, you've got Putin, you've got Xi, look what's happening in Europe. I mean, that is not a good sign. You've got Bolsonaro here, and you've got us, and this is, this is a bad sign. These are very powerful countries that are all kind of going in the wrong direction. So, I don't mean to sound like, kumbaya, that, oh gosh, everything is fine, but it's theoretically possible. But the problem is that the United States is an economic and military powerhouse. It's the one. It's got the biggest military in the world. We spend more on our military than all the other countries combined. That still is real, and that's a very dangerous thing for us, because if we become a threat, bad things can happen. And I think a lot of people in this world are starting to see us as at best a competitor rather than an ally, and at worst an enemy. And this is not a good thing. And I don't know, it really requires people to be take this seriously. It's not, Donald Trump seems like a clown, but he is a clown, but an evil clown, and he has to be taken seriously, even though it's kind of hard to do so sometimes.
All right. Well, let's pivot to just how seriously people are going to take things in 5 or 6 days. I mean, the midterm elections, obviously, there's a tremendous sort of like generic secular, if you will, disadvantage to Democrats in this cycle in terms of the Senate. There are, I think, it's 2/3 of the incumbents who are facing re-election are Democrats. So the Democrats had far more to defend. A lot of the races, though, in terms of the Senate, are not, we go back 2 years ago. We talk about people who we think could have problems, right? Like Sherrod Brown or, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. Folks, in the Midwest, broadly speaking. I mean, Donnelly's still in trouble. Manchin seems to be okay. Heidi Heitkamp obviously having some problems, but sort of the solid Democrats in the Midwest, in states that are sort of purpley states, that people thought might be problematic are not. I don't know what that tells us about their candidacies as much as it might tell us about the states or people, being disaffected with Donald Trump. But there's definitively a hardening, it seems to me, of people's positions, right? Because Trump wouldn't feel like he could go out and do this. He thinks he's strengthening himself, at least in terms of the Senate, right, by doing this, or at the very least hardening the ramparts, or I guess fortifying the Alamo, as it were. And I mean, by all appearances, it's gonna work. Brett Kavanaugh did not hurt them. It seems to have helped on some level, at least in the red states.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that, if you look at the polling and even Donald Trump's approval rating, I mean, he's really strange that way. Most presidents have some play in their approval rating depending on what's going on, and his has been very, very narrow. I mean, the only good part about that is that he starts out very low for a president, right around 40%, and it just stays there. So that says to me that, his base of support is pretty solid. I mean, it really is. But as somebody pointed out, I think maybe it was James Fallows from The Atlantic, that, Herbert Hoover got 40% in 1932 right. In the depth of the Depression. There's always a base of the opposing party, right, no matter what is happening. So we shouldn't be too surprised by that. And the fact that, the way that our politics are sort of shaking out in this polarized era is in these red states. I mean, they tend to be sort of states with a big rural population, and that is a place where you find, the hardest core Trump voters, the people who really like him and are, approving of the Republican Party's acquiescence to him, which is why they're voting for Republicans. They like that. And, as we know, going into this election, and we knew this 2 years ago, we knew it 4 years ago, that this map was going to be very, very difficult for Democrats. And I even remember, and you probably recall this too, 2 years ago, looking at the House map, people were really, pessimistic about the Democrats' ability to take the House because it with all the gerrymandering and all the districts, the way that they were laid out, it did not look very likely that Democrats could do it if the Republican, president was able to, hold on to at least a few of his coattails. And the Senate, of course, was just considered a write-off. There was never any change. What are we talking about? Let's forget that. We weren't just going to, the Democrats weren't just going to not gain any seats. They were going to lose a bunch of seats, as you just pointed out. And that would have included somebody like Sherrod Brown or Tammy Baldwin after 2016, because you would have thought that was Trump country. So, I don't, I think it's hardening, but I'm not sure it's hardening in a way that is to their benefit. And I'm not sure that Trump is doing them any favors because, one of the things that he just does not understand is that for every one of his, red hats at his rallies, there's a couple other Republicans out there that are repulsed by what he's doing, and he needs to think a little bit about that. Now, most Republicans are backing him, but what is it? It's like 80%. I mean, that's not unanimous, and I suspect his big problem is the Republican leading independents, right? And they're falling the other way this time.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things about this that strike me. One is that Fallows is right? 40%, although George W. Bush fell below 40%. I think, if I remember, he was in the mid to low 30s at one point for a considerable period of time. It suggests to me a couple of things. One, Donald Trump might be sui generis in terms of the threat that he constitutes in terms of like our status around the world or our ability to get into a sort of knee-jerk, horrible conflict. But fundamentally, he is aligned with the Republican Party. Like, he is not distinct from Republicans in any shape or matter. I mean, it appears to me, right? Because he's doing quite well in the most Republican of areas. I mean, we talk about his national approval rating is going up, inching up a little bit, but in some states, like, he's well above 50% because they are Republican-dominated states. On top of which, I mean, the other thing that occurs to me about this is that those Republican suburban voters who are abandoning him or supposedly abandoning him, they've got their tax cuts, right? And there's a couple of social things that they say, hey, I think this has gone too far. But I wonder how, obviously we need those voters for the midterms. And I hope, though, that Democrats and, Nancy Pelosi has an agenda that is, for Congress that I didn't. Maybe it's in there. I didn't see voting rights. There's not the things on the agenda are not those things that should edify Democratic power to the extent that there is Democratic power. Now, obviously, they can't pass anything if there's a Republican Senate, but you're setting the table. There's a reason why you do these things. They should be edifying Democratic power within the Democratic base, right? Like, ensure voting rights. Let's try and help out unions. And I worry that those Republican voters who are with us today, because Donald Trump is an offensive human being, won't necessarily be there 2, 4, 6 years from now if there's an attempt to sort of reprioritize where, let's say, the money expended on those tax cuts go.
Well, and let's just look at it from a purely, cynical political basis. The bigger the tent gets, right, the bigger the Democratic coalition, you suddenly start bringing in a bunch of, former Republicans into the tent. You suddenly got a bunch of conflict within the tent because these aren't people that necessarily, they're not Bernie Sanders people, okay? So, we're going to have, I hope everybody's prepared for this. I mean, this is going to be a big battle. Now, I'm hopeful that it's not going to happen within the next 2 years. My suspicion is that the focus will be on Trump. I suspect that you'll have an agenda that includes all those things that you're talking about, as well as, stuff like, reversing the tax cuts and doing a bunch of other things. I mean, they can't actually do it, but they'll talk about it, they'll have
you're
hearings,
setting it up, right? You're setting it up.
Yeah, set it up. And, of course, you've got a very, what is going to be a contentious presidential primary among a bunch of Democrats who are running from all over the country, everywhere. And that's all going to be sorted out, and it's going to be very public, and we're going to have that argument going into the presidential race. But I think that people will be focused for 2 years on defeating Donald Trump in 2020, and that will probably, somehow sort of tamp down whatever true disagreements exist on a sort of vitriolic level. I'm hopeful anyway, because I think it's probably better. I think we should have the argument, but I think it should be pretty. Hopefully it will be something that's kind of, civil and understandable, and there's not a lot of hard feelings this time. And Donald Trump, I think, will tend to focus the mind better than anything else. But, this is going to happen. I mean, when you bring in a bunch of Republicans into the Democratic Party, there's going to be a bunch of there's going to be definite pressure to adhere to take on more conservative policies.
Right.
They're more conservative people, right? I mean, so that's going to happen, and it's fine. That we can. I think that the party can handle it, but I think that people like us, we're going to be in a position of having to fight very hard for what we believe in on the progressive side, and make sure that we don't get into that thing, because money plays a big part in that.
Yep.
And that's one thing where I think is really important. What we're seeing in this election for the first time, I think, and it's really setting an example of how powerful this grassroots fundraising is. I mean, these Democratic candidates, a lot of them are not taking any kind of PAC money. I'm not saying they're not being helped on some level by outside groups that are doing ads and things like that, but just on a pure fundraising level, these people are doing really well just with grassroots fundraising, and it's providing a model for how the Democratic Party can go forward. And if progressives, that's one area I think progressives should push hard, which is no PAC, none of this corporate fundraising. We're not doing it anymore, and that will take some of the pressure off on taking on some of these conservative views. They won't be quite as likely to be, running around catering to, CEOs and Wall Street, hedge fund managers. Not quite.
We're up against it, but I want to touch on this for just a couple of minutes, because I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this. We talk again in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about this. The other day, Benjamin Wittes, another guy from Lawfare, another guy, Bates, who was on the Ken Starr investigation, they were responsible for a FOIA request. Maybe it was a FOIA request, I'm not exactly sure, where some archives were released. They were from the Nixon era. And these archives, it was the Watergate roadmap. It was notes from Leon Jaworski, I think. And it was Jack Goldsmith and Benjamin Wittes. Those are, and Stephen Bates. And the U.S. Archives released these court documents that show a federal grand jury in February of '74 was prepared to indict Richard Nixon. Talks about the subpoenas, talks about the draft of the indictment, and there was a roadmap that was developed. Part of it was with the help of Archibald Cox, who at that point had been fired by Nixon. Part of it was by Jaworski, and part of it was written by the judge who was overseeing this stuff. And all this stuff had basically been put away, archived. And these guys worked, they petitioned for the documents to be released. Now, I don't know why they were released now, right? As opposed to this is a weird time, a couple of days before the election. But everybody anticipates Jeff Sessions to be fired, after the election, and maybe other things happening. There's another piece out there that suggests that maybe Mueller has already issued a subpoena to Trump. I think you told me before we got on that Marcy Wheeler, and I neglected to read Marcy before coming on the air today, which is always a huge mistake. But that Marcy Wheeler is not as convinced. But nevertheless, I have a real sense that in the next 6 weeks, as we get closer to Christmas and the New Year, there's going to be a lot of like civic activity that is going to have to take place, right? I mean, do you have that sense too?
Feels that way. Yes, it sure feels that way. I mean, there's a lot of news starting to trickle out about Roger Stone and that whole side of it. Steve Bannon was called back into the grand jury. But as for the Nixon thing, just to briefly touch on that, that was really fascinating because what that document had been handed over to Congress at the time, and that was the basis that they used for their impeachment. What's the word I'm looking for? Impeachment document. And
the articles of impeachment.
The articles of impeachment, right? That had been used for that, and it had been kept secret this whole time. I mean, nobody from they wanted it to be secret. They kept it secret. It was grand jury stuff, right? I mean, you don't normally. I mean, that is the way it's supposed to work. The grand jury stuff is not supposed to be public. Ken Starr didn't care about that. He actually put Bill Clinton's grand jury testimony on television,
right?
Or actually Newt Gingrich did that. But regardless, and normal people, they have respect for the secrecy of the grand jury. And this is very interesting. And what Wittes and company say is that what this does is provide a roadmap for Robert Mueller, which is very different than the Starr report, which I think is what people are kind of expecting to come out, that it's going to be some narrative, with it, like Ken Starr's bodice-ripping romance novel that he wrote. But that's not what this is. This is just the facts, ma'am. It's very, very, Jack Webb. It's just very laid out. The grand jury, they laid it out point by point by point. And the simplicity of it is what impressed all the legal beagles who looked at this and went, whoa, this is devastating on a legal basis. And they didn't make any conclusions. They didn't say, look, this is what we think is impeachable, this isn't, blah, blah, blah. They didn't say anything like the Ken Starr report. It was just, these are the crimes that we think are indictable, and we would indict him if he were not president. I mean, that's basically, because Jaworski had convinced many of the grand jury, apparently, majority of the grand jury, wanted to indict the president. They felt there was evidence there, and Jaworski convinced them to call him an unindicted co-conspirator instead, which is devastating enough for a president, and that's really what put him over the edge. And made it necessary for him to resign. But, this is a pretty amazing document. I sort of, I'm not a lawyer, so, looking at it, I couldn't really tell how devastating the actual legal implications are. But just the volume of it, it's like 52 pages, very spare, but it's one thing after another. And many of them are things that we are aware of. Most of them are, of what Nixon's crimes were. But when you see it laid out in that sort of a legal document, it's like, wow, and if Mueller has something like that in mind for what's going to happen, I think this could be, it could be a real shocker.
It seems to me, though, the argument, what we're seeing is lobbying that is taking place in the legal community for the legitimacy of something like this, right? And so the idea is in the minds of these people, right, who are not necessarily my favorite people anyways, but in this instance, they're carrying a fairly important flag. I think that the idea is they're putting pressure. It seems to me, right? Like they're putting this is like an audience of like one or two, right? Like they're putting pressure. This is them trying to put pressure on either the D.C. Circuit Court or probably the Supreme Court, right? Like just simply
I think it's John Roberts.
Right. I mean, if you they're basically saying to John Roberts, This is it. And now, we all knew these documents were out there. Not, none of it's particularly new except for the sort of the legal principles and the boxes you have to tick off along the way to do this. And John Roberts, you should be aware that history is now aware of this. So you're going to be going against history, against what happened last time to a Republican president, in a much less not a partisan era. And if you do this, understand, I don't know, I remember some after school special or something on the signing of the Constitution, or maybe it was the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it was really, stuff for kids, but there was one guy, I can't remember if he was from Maryland or what, at the time, the representative, where he was like, do you really want to be the guy known for throughout it, who was the one who didn't sign? Because that's who you be. And on some level, this is like, the legal establishment saying to John Roberts, here's your bar. Are you going to, you can lean on precedent, or you can be the radical who down the road in American history, you're the one who let Donald Trump get off of this. I mean, this is going to be.
Are you going to be a hero or a villain? I mean, I think that's pretty simple stuff. And I think that one of the things that one of the people who came out was George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband. He wrote an op-ed with Neil Katyal, who is a Democrat, although he's very sort of centrist and weird, but nonetheless. They wrote an op-ed, sort of, defending Mueller on this basis as well. This is, I think this is big, and I think it's meaningful. And you bring up the timing, and I think it was the circuit court judge, wasn't it Howell, who actually ruled that these had to be released right now. I mean, I think you're right that it feels as though the legal establishment itself is kind of, they're sending out signal after signal after signal that somehow or another, this is important, and if you want to preserve the justice system, the country, any form of legitimacy and credibility with this institution of our judicial system, you better take this seriously. And I think that, I'm sure that Mueller and his people are reading it and, trying to figure out whatever their strategy is going forward. I mean, Marcy Wheeler has always said that, that maybe Mueller wouldn't even write a report, that basically what he would do is he was going to indict people and lay out the case much as this case was laid out against Richard Nixon in this thing, just in pure, legal terms. No editorializing whatsoever about the meaning of it or anything else like Ken Starr did. Or basically, it was actually Brett Kavanaugh was one of the authors of the Starr report, so, we know where he stands. But, I think this is a very interesting development. And like you, I also believe that the minute that the election is over, that we're going to start seeing some major activity on this front. And I think it's going to be very turbulent because, I don't think any of us really know the depth of Mueller's evidence and where he's going with this. I mean, there are lots of little clues, but I don't think we really know. So it could be very, very interesting over the next couple of months.
Well, Digby, I'm sure we'll be talking more about this in the future. Thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, you bet. Oh, thanks. Everybody vote on Tuesday for sure.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Digby. All right, folks.
Bye.
We're going to take a quick break. Head into the Kindler Zone. Andy Kindler will be joining us in just a sec. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday. We are 3 days away from, at least 3 business days away from a very, very important election. I know there's a lot of people who are out canvassing as we speak, who are listening to the show on their phones. And we have given them more reason to continue their hard work as they go about trying to make sure that their neighbors and people in their community vote. And now it's an opportunity to reward them with this.
With a Jew like Andy Kindler, you know you can't go wrong. His ancestors wrote the God Bless America song. A true Obama bot, and he believes Obama can never be wrong. Yeah, AndyKindler.com. You made me laugh so hard, I had to write you your theme song. Andy Kindler.
Yeah.
Andy Kindler.
Can you believe it?
I cannot believe it, sir. I am so glad that you're here with us. How are you, Andy? I should tell you
I'm
that...
doing good.
That
I don't know what you've heard. Okay, I'm not going to be funny, I can tell.
I should tell you right now, both Jamie and Michael are out of the office. Jamie.
Yeah, what is this? I finally tagged someone? I mean, God forbid, I don't even know who anybody's name. I barely remember your name. Now I tag everybody, and everyone's out of the studio?
Well,
what is this, a prank?
Jamie had, long-time plans to be on the road today. And Michael just, didn't feel like coming in today. So
Right. Why come in today? Because when you come to New York, we have to have coffee. When you come to New York, but he can't show up on the day that I'm on the show, right? Okay.
Well, I don't want to make you not feel special, but there is no one who has ever been on the show where he hasn't tried to hook up with them socially.
Oh, that does not make me feel special.
Oh, well.
I heard that when Goebbels came on a trip years ago, he tried. I'm sorry.
Just about anybody who has been on the show or is mentioned on the show, I think Michael has reached out to for coffee.
Well, it's unbelievable that Jamie's not there, because I sent in the new Dennis Miller. I mean, I don't want to talk about Dennis Miller, but there's new Dennis Miller information. He's no longer going to be the political guy. He's going back to his roots, making references that aren't that funny, but people still laugh.
Well, that's that was the story. He's been doing all these interviews, it seems like.
I posted one from today.
There was one today.
Just 3 hours ago from the Kansas City Star.
Yeah, that was the AP. There was a story from the Wall Street Journal. I think this was about 3 weeks ago now. And everybody sent it to us, and they're like, you got to talk to Andy about this. I noticed that right after he had done that, after he had given that interview in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was, he's still tweeting things. In that interview, Dennis Miller plans politics break after fake news special, which, of course, why wouldn't you break from politics now? Because there's not much going on.
It's not in the news. It's not in the news anymore.
And... It's not.
That makes me laugh. I didn't even think of that part of it. Look, folks, I'm trying to be topical. Nobody wants to hear about the world blowing up now.
Click
I'm trying
that.
To be topical.
Click that real. Okay, so here it is. This was a story that was back here. Send it to me because I'll be able to open it up. But the headline is: after years on the right, Dennis Miller wants to find comedy's middle ground. Which is just. I mean, first of all, has there been a time where comedy has been more political? Like it's like that politics are more relevant, more important for comedians to talk about, or people are pissed about. It's just what a wholesale retreat from like the damage this guy has. I don't know if you can say that he's done or contributed to, but certainly tried to contribute to in this country.
Yeah, and he's a rich guy. He's a guy. I mean, he's got his finger on the pulse of what's happening in society from his mansion up in Santa Barbara, where he hides from everybody.
And he says in that the interview that's released, like he's socially liberal, but fiscally conservative, which is the dumbest dodge. Like, this is something that could actually fly. I feel like, maybe you could get away with that like 15, 20 years ago. But that's such a joke now. Everybody knows that. First of all, how can you support, if you're socially liberal, how could you possibly support the Republican Party today?
Well, I mean, I'm starting to question whether he is social. Well, you know what he used to say? He used to say that he wasn't anti-gay and all that kind of stuff. That's what he was. That's his idea of being socially liberal.
Right. Like, I don't have views from the 1950s, and I also believe that it shouldn't be illegal for white people and black people to marry.
Yeah, I even think with gay, like if I used to listen to him all the time when he was on that right-wing show on AM, because I just loved it. I was so fascinated, and he still was afraid to even say that he's not anti-gay. You know what I'm saying? When you get a barrage of calls, he still tried to be nice to horrible people.
Well, and he also doesn't seem to have, he seems to have still a problem with like maybe immigrants. Let's play this is his special. And I got to say, like, this is from that Wall Street Journal piece. Why now?
New special? New special, right?
Well, yeah, this is what he said. Like, why now? I don't think you want to be the last guy suggesting we play charades at the Hatfield-McCoy cookout. And I don't
understand one word. I don't understand one word in that sentence. And I know references.
He's explaining. Well, let's listen to his. There's so much here. I'm getting.
You don't want to be the last guy at the Hatfield-McCoy Dodge City get out of Dodge by 10 meeting, right?
Well, let's play. Here's a clip of his new special, and then we'll talk about why he's getting
on
out
the
of
other
this.
side.
Yeah,
let's talk on the other side.
Yeah, let's talk on the other side. Okay, here we go. This is what's the name of this special? Is it Comedy Dynamics, or is that just the name of his?
It's a fake news, real jokes.
That's the name of the company.
That's the Comedy Dynamics. Fake news, real jokes.
Reference comic.
Yeah, here we go.
I think social media has allowed us to all come together as one and realize there was really no reason whatsoever for us to all come together as one. I have an idea for a reality show about hoarders with impeccable taste. Quite frankly, they shouldn't throw anything out. Took my nephew out to a small, tiny local circus. It was very disappointing. Turns out it was just a house that had been tenant for termite proofing.
Pause it.
Isn't the circus closed? The circus is closed, right?
Well,
there is no more circus.
Doesn't it feel like that joke was written like literally like 35 years ago?
Yeah, I went to a flea circus and I didn't know there were that many fleas that could do a backflip. Boom, 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 boom.
Don't you get this sense that Mueller was sitting in his study in a big leather chair, and he says to his probably poorly paid intern who he's using to assemble, like he goes like, Kevin, go down into the basement, go to the file cabinet, pull out all the stuff from the file cabinet that Eddie Driscoll wrote for me in 1989. And
I'm going to make that investment in Joan Rivers' card catalog cabinet pay off finally.
Exactly.
He bought her old
like,
jokes.
Let's pull out the old ones. Who gives a crap? I'm too tired for this shit. And go ahead, let's.
Proofing. Can we make it as hard to get into our country as it is to get off your plane when it arrives early at the terminal?
That's a good one, right? Like, pause it.
Yeah.
Like, there it is. Fake news. I like that they put fake news up after that because now I know you shouldn't hold him to any type of standard about truth, but that's what he says he's up there, right? I'm truth telling. And the fact is, it's very difficult to get into the country legally or without documentation. I mean, no matter what. And but he's socially liberal.
Yeah, as horrible as it is about people getting into the country, it's like he knows these people are going crazy about the idea of keeping brown people out of the country. They love that part of his act, who's ever coming to see him. But now let me put that aside now, and let me talk about do my Copernicus material.
Exactly. I brought out the airplane stuff, but I wanted to make it sound racist too. So here it is.
He's feeding. Can you believe that he lies so much? He feeds right into their fears. It's easier to get into this country than it is to log on to America.
I mean, he's Donald Trump with a lot more sort of glibness, cleverness, and a past where he exhibited some modicum of talent. But at the end of the day, the messaging is exactly the same. Here, continue. Is there more? Fake news.
You can't trust journalists. You can't trust the New York Times. You're better off trusting the odometer readings in the Auto Trader, for God's sakes.
Pause it. People don't really use the Auto Trader anymore.
Is that a metaphor? Sam?
Do they still have the Auto Trader? It's like he still imagines people are buying this stuff from their local Piggly Wigglies instead of looking online. But let's see where
you might as well go to the Penny Saver from 1973 and try and buy a chest of drawers.
Yeah, you still looking in the classified? Oh, wait a second. Go ahead.
The recycler.
You want to know how little a journalism degree matters? I have one.
Closet. You know, I like too that they did the old thing by stopping the music. Watch this. Here we go.
Yeah.
They punch it. Ready?
Trader, for God's sakes. You want to know how little a journalism degree matters? I have one. I see Trump's obvious downside. I think we all do. I think he was born in Kenya.
Who could laugh? I couldn't even laugh that loud if I was being tickled. I mean, I can't even believe he's born in Kenya. Woo!
Yeah, you're talking about the black guy who was president. Oh, God.
You know what? He's 2 weeks away from going, Obama's like that fifth guy from Star Trek who goes down to the planet and then Ensign Pulver, he's all of a sudden disappears.
Let's go to what he wrote here. That he said in this interview at Wall Street Journal, because it's really important. Okay. But off stage, he confesses that sometimes he dreams about escaping America's raging political divide, which, we should be clear, he certainly helped create, right? He laments how polarized every spoken word of public discourse has become. I mean, grab me that frickin' doll that we have over here and just listen to what he was saying 20 years ago when, the idea that we shouldn't go and invade Iraq for no reason. Here it is. Thank you. He's...
I hear some in the pro-choice movement decrying our use of preemptive warfare against terrorism. Hey, if it helps you get your head around it, don't think of it as warfare. Think of it as us choosing to abort terrorists.
All right, so there he is.
Didn't you see that joke come? I mean, he sets up the joke. He tells you the joke.
Yeah, no, his joke was pretty straightforward. This was him 20 years ago, the socially liberal guy telling...
Are you telling me that's from 20 years ago?
This doll was produced during the run-up to the Iraq War.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. He's always been a jerk.
This is the guy, when he talks about polarization in this country, he's going around saying, you can't trust the French, who incidentally were like, hey, why are we invading this country again? Everything I'm telling you, there's a lot of young people who have no idea the toxicity that this a-hole, and I'm not, I'm holding him here, entered into the popular bloodstream. He was such a hero for the right, they made a doll about him.
You're so angry you can't even call him a reference comedian.
At the end of the day, it is connected to a big friggin' bomb.
That's right. The U.S. has a long fuse, but it's attached to a big bomb. We killed hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq by our own Defense Department numbers.
Hey, what's going on back there?
Oh, yeah, he's laughing about the button that you press in the back of the doll. All right, so he writes, I'm going out, I'm going to get out of the nodding applause business and back into the involuntary laughter business. We saw what that entailed. Like, hey, at least he's not Kenyan. I'm trying what's called a reverse Marcel Marceau, where I imagine myself not to be in a box. Why?
Oh, my God.
Why now? Why now? I don't think you want to be the last guy suggesting we play charades at the Hatfield-McCoy cookout.
That's. I'm still having that one looked up.
I know what the Hatfield-McCoy thing is supposed to be.
Yeah, but they didn't have a cookout. That's what I'm saying.
Well, first of all, not only do the Hatfield-McCoys not have a cookout, but right. Hatfield-McCoy is supposed to be a fight that is meaningless, right?
Yes.
It's just as opposed to a fight as to what the future of the country is. And then, what's the charades reference?
I don't know. That's so unbelievable. How could you even do a... Hey, it's like opening up your act with, I'll buy a vowel.
And he's not suggesting we play charades. He's one of the either the Hatfield or the McCoy, and he's shooting at people.
He is true, though. It's a little known historical note that the Hatfields did win because they did invite the McCoys to a fake cookout.
Unbelievable.
And then when they were about to sit down, blam, blam, blam. Oh, he's the most unhappy person in the world, and it makes me so thrilled that he sits around still steaming. What happened? Why am I not back on the top of my game? I shouldn't have gone too political. This is why he thinks he's not funny anymore, because he went political. He's not funny. That's what his problem was.
And the reason why he's not political anymore is because his gigs are drying up. Like his Bill O'Reilly sinecure is folded, and now he's just tired of everything. Here he is on, this is really amazing. This is him on the Larry King program as to why he became a conservative. Think of all the reasons why you might become a conservative in the early 90s, all right? Like, I started to dig into sort of economic questions, or I felt like there was a cultural problem in society. This is right around the time when, in 1992, at the Republican convention, where Dan Quayle or where I should say Pat Buchanan is talking about a culture war in the country. Dan Quayle is railing on Candace Bergen because her character on Murphy Brown was a single mother. Okay? And this is why he decided to become a conservative. Andy, wait, I want you to try and guess.
Because I would think taxes would be my first guess.
Right. Okay. Here he is explaining to Larry King. And this is actually present day, though, right? Like with him and Larry King.
It's like 3 weeks
Okay,
ago.
here it is. He's explaining why
he's on the prostate show?
Why he's becoming a conservative in the early 90s, 1 year after leaving Saturday Night Live.
Okay, Rob M. on Twitter. At what point in your career or personal life did you switch ideologies from a political perspective? You did switch.
Well, no. I've always been a pragmatist, but I do remember during Stockdale. That was a big thing for me. Ross Perot chose James Stockdale. And this guy was a guy who worked out a tap code system in the Hanoi Hilton. Kids who wanted to die overnight.
I was there with that whole selection.
He prays with him.
Great American.
Okay, he runs. Perot picks him because Perot's like, yeah, to me, Perot's crazy. It's like, I want to see him as president for half. I want to see how crazy he is when he meets the Queen of England and go, are you Ruth Buzzy? You know, he's just crazy. So when he picks Stockdale, I think I'll look into this guy. I read about Stockdale to the extent that I can. Then they start making fun of him because he has his first press conference and he looks wide-eyed and he's a deer in a headlight. And he said, well, I don't even know why I'm here. Boom, the liberals just weighed in on him, make fun of him. And I thought, this is getting too flashcardy here. They should invest a little more time in this. And I remember thinking, I'm not sure if I'm certain enough of my guesswork to be liberal anymore. I just started reading on things. Listen.
Pause it. Now, wait a second. Now, so.
What? Wow.
So, first of all, Stockdale said it was during the VP debate. Who am I?
Yeah.
Why am I here?
Who am I, he said. Who am I? Why am I here, right?
He decides to become a conservative because Saturday Night Live mocks the Admiral Stockdale.
Wouldn't that be why he would become a member of the Reform Party, maybe? That would make sense.
But he's also simultaneously saying liberals just look at a flashcard. They don't do any depth. And that's why I changed I changed my political ideology because they were making fun of Stockdale. That seems to me to be like a flashcard reason. No?
Yeah. He just does show that he never really had any political bones anyway, because I think I've told you, like Kevin Rooney wrote a lot of his political, not all of them, but a lot of his political stuff. I think he's always been I'm beginning to think he's always been a nincompoop. But you told me this was a recent interview and he used Ruth Buzzy?
Well, to be fair, he was talking about Ross Perot saying Ruth Buzzy.
Oh, okay. I got it. That's better.
But I like how he says Ross Perot's crazy. And I left. I decided not to be a liberal because I thought it was all just people making fun of Stockdale.
I can't even believe. I am impressed, though, that he can remember that many details from 20 years ago.
Wait,
sounds like he's still plugged in. He's still plugged into the H. Ross Perot campaign.
This is his political prognosticating on that same Larry King show. Here, Dennis Miller is, he's getting ready. He's giving all these interviews. I want to get out of politics, whatnot. And this is what he thinks is going to happen in 2020.
Some social media questions. Michael James on Facebook. In your opinion, who will be the 2020 Democratic nominee?
I think it's Avenatti as president, and either Kamala Harris or Cory Booker in the 2 slot. I don't know, obviously. It's good, but can you imagine if last time on the Republican thing, it was a demolition derby? What's it going to be like on the Democrat part this side? It's so funny now. I tune in to TV shows for serious political discourse, and I watch press conferences and debates for comedy because they've flipped roles now. It's actually
there's no news anymore.
It's so when I think about who's queuing up already, but they are saying, and that Avenatti might be one of the front runners.
Oh my God!
Wow.
At least he's got some astute political observation. He's really plugged in. He tried that as, what's amazing? He tried that as a joke. And
yes.
Larry King didn't laugh, and then he goes, no, it could be Avenatti.
Right, exactly. He's almost can't stop laughing as he says that.
And Michael Avenatti and Kamala, as if Kamala Harris is like a joke person to bring up. Oh yeah, he went after Kamala Harris again. Oh boy.
It is weird that he's sort of fixated on Kamala Harris and Cory Booker will be his VP, Avenatti's.
And he expected a big laugh from that. I think it's gonna be Michael Avenatti with Kamala Harris.
That one killed in my last special, so I don't know why
he's
you didn't
done though.
laugh.
I love that he's done though, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I like that. But here the best part about it is this: how long do you think it will be after? I mean, supposedly like, his tour is going to be over, right? And then his special is going to be out there. in 6 weeks, nobody's going to be talking about his special anymore. His touring is to promote the special. It's not going to be. How long do you think it's going to be until he's back into politics again? Because he realized like that's the last place that he's selling any of his stuff.
Oh, that's a good bet. And I would say, 6 months he'll be back into the politics, or he will be retired.
Yeah, totally retired.
Totally retired. You never hear from him again. But no, he's too egomaniacal. He's got to be. He can't do that. He can't do that. Although maybe the other choice would be he goes back to the bathrobe shows.
To the what show? Oh, the bathrobe shows.
Yeah.
Is he still doing the Dennis Miller option, or did he opt out on that?
I think he. You know what's amazing? There's nothing that he's probably done that you can't get now on YouTube. I think he was holding this stuff out. Yeah. If you subscribe to my show, you get some of my special, never before seen basement tapes.
I noticed on your Twitter feed that you may have watched the press conference with is it Jacob Wohl, the press conference, the smear Mueller.
Oh, I actually did watch it, but I hadn't watched it until I didn't know that name. That was like someone got me with a name like, and I'm still a little confused.
Okay, so here's the story. This guy Jack Berkman, who is a Republican operative, and another Republican, I guess, operative or conservative, like pro-Trump Twitter guy, Jacob Wohl, who's 20 years old, were announcing that they have a woman who claims that she was raped, right? Was it raped or sexually assaulted by Robert Mueller 20 or 30 years ago? And they got the information from Surefire Intelligence, which turns out to be Jacob Wohl's creation, where he created a website with all pictures that he stole from the internet to supposedly be his investigators. Like, there was the chief of the Israeli bureau was a Israeli supermodel,
Bar Raffaele,
and the head of Zurich. Who was the actor who was the head of the Zurich branch of Surefire?
Was it Christoph Waltz?
Yeah, Christoph Waltz, and he took these pictures and didn't realize that people could identify who they were. And then
at the press did he do that at the press conference? No,
well, here he is at the press conference. He did something like it, where he supposedly had a picture of him with the woman who claimed to have written this affidavit claiming she was assaulted by Mueller, and it turns out people searched it. It's his girlfriend.
Oh, it's Jacob's girlfriend?
Yes. And it's Jacob's girlfriend in her, like, 50s? Right? Because if this happened 30 years ago in 1974, presumably that woman would have had to have been, over 20.
He's in O'Keefe territory now.
Oh,
right?
totally.
He's going up that tree.
What is this clip of him? This is a clip of him at the press conference.
This is a few clips at the press conference, yeah.
Okay, this is him talking because people are giving him grief. Like, you say you're a longtime experienced investigator. You're 20. Let's listen.
Washington Post reported that Mr. Mueller, they re-reported that Mr. Mueller was at jury duty as to discredit this accuser. That's why they re-reported it. That's why it's going around.
Jacob,
but real quick, excuse me.
August 3rd, 2010.
Excuse me. Rather than double checking and saying, wait a second, was he only at jury duty? Sometimes people go to jury duty, but they're also somewhere else. Was he only at jury duty? No, hang on, it's not funny. This is not a laughing matter.
Pause it. There you go. He anticipated your laughter, Andy.
He's got Ricky Gervais's haircut from the 80s.
Yes. Here is when they start asking him about his age and how he could have so much experience as an investigator.
So you're 20 years old, Jacob, right? You're 20 years old. Describe to me your investigative experience
And when did you get this honorary Harvard Law degree?
It's a figure of speech.
Pause it.
Okay.
Hold on. He apparently claimed he had an honorary Harvard Law degree. And of course, that's a figure of speech, right?
Yeah. That's great. Oh, I hope this never ends.
Andy, I mean, like, how many times have you used that figure of speech that you have an honorary Harvard Law degree?
Is he wearing something from Star Trek: The Next Generation? Is that what the guy's wearing?
He should have had his sunglasses on.
He should have had his sunglasses on. He's like the Terminator. All right, let's go. He's the Harvard. What? Andy, just help me out here. How would you use honorary Harvard Law degree as a figure of speech in a sentence?
Figure of speech. You know, it's like I have a. You know, it's like a. I can't say. You know what? I couldn't do it. It's an expression. It's an expression. That's what it is.
Stop being such a Harvard honorary law degree. That doesn't work. Are you hungry? God, I've got like a Harvard honorary law degree. I'm so hungry.
All of a sudden, I'm starved. I'm starved like that time I ate my honorary Harvard Law degree. That's how hungry I am.
Are you tired? I'm so tired I could get a Harvard honorary law degree.
I also have an honorable fake mention from Yale.
There you go. All right, here we go.
And when did you get this honorary Harvard Law degree?
It's a figure of speech. Okay.
Okay, so you're 20 years old. What is your investigative? What is your background as a professional investigator?
Like I said, I've done a handful of matters. I've done a handful of matters like this over the years. My mission here is not to establish a narrative. It's not to follow an agenda. It's to bring forth. Hang on. It's to bring forth the facts and let the facts speak for themselves, and that's what we've done here.
Jack Berkman steps in and he is giggling like, I don't understand what the hell this is about.
Who's using the excuse? The Trump patented "excuse me"? That's Trump's signature line.
They're all
Excuse
adopted.
me.
It. It's all gotten insane, Andy.
I like this. I love this Jacob Wall now. Look at him. He's so. Where do you go from this? Where does someone go from there?
Where does he go? This is amazing. So he put on. Where is this? Is this on Twitter that he put it up?
It looks like he blogged this out. So he did Microsoft Paint over her face and put it up on his blog.
Okay, so he says below is a photo of Wall and the accuser, who at this time is fearful of her life and requests to remain anonymous. This is upon arriving in Washington, D.C. She panicked and boarded a flight to another occasion. He posted this picture of him with the accuser, and then somebody again found that same picture, and it turns out to be his girlfriend.
And there's also a lot of interesting sleuthing going on. The ceiling was identified as in LAX and not in any DC airports.
This guy should never leave the house. He could green screen his whole career.
Now, when do you think, at what point, do you think, what do you think happens to this guy? Because I would bet within a couple of years, this is a guy who's going to be making a boatload of money doing some right-wing thing like Project Sorta Veritas or something like that.
Well, where's O'Keefe now? Is O'Keefe tearing it up? Is he killing it?
O'Keefe had apparently got a volunteer of Beto O'Rourke's on camera saying something to the effect of what was it? Was it Beto O'Rourke's or Gillum's? He got some volunteer.
He did a hike camp person too. He's got people all over. He's
got volunteers for candidates saying stuff that's inappropriate. People who sign up to volunteer, literally one of the thousands of people, and then he refers to them as staffers, but they're usually they're unpaid volunteers.
Oh, God, please let this be funny next Wednesday morning.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, should we play one clip of O'Reilly?
Sure.
We've got a clip of O'Reilly in his basement complaining about sensitivity training at Michigan State, or O'Reilly freaking out about Soros. Which one do you
I
want?
like him freaking out. I like him.
All right, this is the one about O'Reilly. This is O'Reilly's defense, right? After it turns out that Soros was the target of essentially an attempt to bomb him to death. Here is Bill O'Reilly. Remember, Bill O'Reilly was one of the pioneers in demonizing Soros. And he's going to...
I didn't know that even. I didn't even know
yeah, back in the day. Back when he was like talking like, I went up to Harlem and ate, and you didn't hear anybody say mofo this or mofo past the grits, any of that. It was all normal. And this is...
What a great guy, right, Jason Silverstein? What a great guy. Financially supports democracy and human rights causes.
Pause it. He's reading off of a piece about Soros, and he's really upset.
He's steamed.
What a great guy.
Financially supports democracy and human rights causes. More than 100 countries. This is what I mean. You can't trust a word. Now, no mention that Soros was convicted of a felony in France.
Pause it. He was convicted of insider trading. Was that what it was? In France.
He's got the century book, Sam. Don't mess with him. He's got the century book.
He knows it all from last century, but that's last century. Okay.
No mention that Hungary, the country of Hungary, recently passed a law against him intruding in their internal politics. Didn't mention it.
Pause it for a second. Now
Hungary is a right-wing Nazi dictatorship, isn't it?
It is full-on fascist these days, and they don't like the Jews. You know, there's a long history. Gorka's little badge of Retzi or whatever that is, Vitezziron is all about Hungary's passing laws about the Jews.
Country of Hungary recently passed a law against him intruding in their internal politics. Didn't mention it. I guess Jason didn't know. Makes me furious.
CBS. Go back. So here's Bill O'Reilly's attempting to sort of to knock Soros. This is the way he tears apart this piece. No.
Mention it. I guess Jason didn't know. Makes me furious. CBS News. All right, and then he writes a bit down.
This is a great show.
But the Soros scorn hit a fever pitch in the early 2000s once he became more involved in American politics, specifically opposing George W. Bush. He compared the Bush administration to the Nazi and communist regimes, saying Bush had improved on the techniques of governing by fear, and Soros spent more than $27 million unsuccessfully opposing Bush's 2004 re-election. Okay, so this guy Soros, he's a hero. He's supporting democracy. Silverstein goes on to write, quote, the conservative movement...
He doesn't have, he just lays the predicate. He doesn't come back with the other half of the sentence. It's like, oh, he's supporting democracy. And then he runs out of, he doesn't have he doesn't have a criticism.
Hey, meanwhile, Soros, the Nazis in his own country hate him. That's what they think of Soros. They said to him, the Nazis in his own country said, don't interfere with our politics anymore.
He's a hero. He's supporting democracy. Silverstein goes on to write, quote, the conservative movement responded by unleashing fury on Soros, and he became a constant target for Fox News and other right-wing commentators. Bill O'Reilly ran a 10-minute segment on Soros, calling him an extremist, and an off-the-chart, dangerous person, accusing him of funding propaganda and manipulating liberal politics with his fortune. Absolutely true. I did more than 10 minutes, you pinhead. I did accumulation, couple of hours. It's absolutely true what I said. Okay? Propaganda, manipulating liberal politics. Here's the proof. Jason Silverstein, get a little pen, write this down.
There you go. Okay.
I think David.
Pinhead. He's bringing back Pinhead. I don't think he said that. I mean, I haven't watched him in a long time, but I think he stopped saying that on his Fox show. Maybe he said it more on his radio program back in the day.
Oh, because he found out it was an actual condition? Because it was an actual. It's based on. Someone once told me a lot of those words are actually based on old things, so they're really more insulting than he knows.
Wow, I had no idea.
No, but I mean, even the Lettermans use it. But I just found out all these things like imbecile, moron, they were all used. I don't know if you saw that documentary about eugenics.
No.
But yeah, those words were all used by this idiot who decided that people were feeble-minded, and I don't want to bring us down, though.
Oh. Andy, what's the latest? What are you up to these days?
Well, I'm coming. Here's another chance for you to avoid seeing me. Saturday after Thanksgiving at Union Hall.
Oh, you're
I've got
kidding.
2 tickets with your name on them.
I may come back from Massachusetts early for that.
Well, I was hoping Michael would go, but apparently Michael can't even go to when I'm on the phone. He can't
even make it to the show. Never mind go to your show.
Yeah, now he's gonna. Yeah, I like to see his story. Yeah, so that's all I really have going, and also Thought Spiral. Thought Spiral is charging up. Me and J. Elvis Weinstein is our what is it called? A podcast.
Well, no, wait a second. You only have one show scheduled?
Oh no, 2 shows on the Saturday after. Oh, no. You mean like other shows
in the future?
Like a regular comic?
Hey, wait a second. Did you get a new website?
What's that?
You didn't get a new website, did you?
No, my website still has, for the people who like the classics, my 1997 tour dates.
I was going to say, like, I'm actually on your website right now, looking at the calendar,
God.
and it only goes out like 3 weeks.
We can't. We're very busy over here. We can't constantly update my dates. I mean, what do you think this is?
Let's see. There's a big gap between.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm working on my Union Hall shows now.
Oh, is that what's going on?
Yeah, I'm practicing. No, things will turn around for me, Sam. You know that. I'm on the Majority Report. Everything's going to happen for me.
You're on Thought Spiral.
Thought Spiral. And it's just me and Josh Elvis Weinstein, just 2 people. That's all we do. There's no guests, in case that helps.
What? And I noticed like, on Twitter, I feel like you've been like calmer lately.
Oh, you know why? Because I've been on Prozac, and I've been in therapy for 2 years.
Is that right? Is it finally kicking in?
No, the Prozac kicked in a long time ago. But I'm actually getting better, more healthy as a human being. Like, used to be, I'd see something on CNN, on Wolf. I'd watch somebody say something on Wolf, and I'd run to the computer. What's this idiot schmooky schmacky schmeeky from, I was just crazed. And now I have an actual life, Sam.
I mean, I'm looking at like your Twitter feed, and it seems completely tame. I mean, at one point
I like people.
You retweeted Eddie Glaude saying thanks for the great conversation with 4 or 5 other people that you weren't a part of.
He was great. He's been on fire recently. I don't know if you watch him. He's on fire, that guy.
He's really good. But, I mean, all he did was thank other people.
You know who also is great? That Brett Stevens. Oh, he's so inspiring.
Brett Stevens?
No, yeah, I hate him. Is he the guy I hate, the New York Times guy?
Oh, yeah, you're thinking. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, Brett Stevens.
People don't even know. He's not even on anybody's radar. He's the new. I'm obsessed with the new conservative voices that are supposed to be moderate, like the guy at MSNBC, Charlie Sykes or something. Whatever.
Yeah, well, Charlie Sykes. Yeah, who with all due respect to him, is as responsible, and supposedly he owned some of it, but he was very responsible for where the Republican Party is today. It
Yeah,
seems to me.
yeah. All
At
of a
least
sudden
in
he comes
Wisconsin.
out a couple of years ago, I don't like the tone. You set the tone.
Right. Let's see. Oh, and you did. You bought, I see back a couple of days ago, you bought a bucket of generic Prozac for $3 at CVS. That's great.
This is some of the hilarious tweets that I've replaced. Does that look like Dennis Miller has dentures? I can't tell.
It does.
That's dentures, right?
Yeah. I wasn't going to say anything about it. But...
I want him to have dentures so bad.
He does.
You know, I could eat all I want now with, and then do commercials for dentures.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. Everybody's going to get there one point or another. I have a fake tooth.
What a hilarious Twitter feed I have, Sam. You're right.
Yeah, this is good stuff. Trump is like Hitler. If if Hitler couldn't find Poland on a map.
I'm proud of that one.
There you go.
How come no one's laughing in studio? Oh, I forgot. Nobody
nobody's here.
stayed in studio today.
No, nobody's here today. Well, Andy, so you're gonna be at Union Hall. Is that it? Where is it?
Yeah, where are you going to be? You're on the road?
Well, I go to Massachusetts for Thanksgiving.
Oh,
and
that's right.
Hang
That's
out
right.
there. But maybe if I'm back in time, I will go.
We should socialize those, Sam. I mean, or I should come in the studio or something. Or
I would
or
love
someone
that.
should fly me to New York.
Are you going to be there for a while?
No, that's the only thing. Not on Thanksgiving, but I'll make a plan, or we'll all do a road trip to Dennis Miller's new stand-up. I'm looking forward to the new chapter.
That would be great to see what happens after this. Well, Andy,
I love you, man.
I love you too. Thanks so much for coming on, and it's always a good. Oh, well, I guess one thing that we had a problem with Tom Sharpling. I mean, this is.
It's disgusting what he said, right?
It's disgusting. You said
You know,
something very benign. In 8 hours, I'll be on the Majority Report.
Unbelievable.
Maybe I should try sleeping in between. And and Sharpling came back with, I know that in 8 hours something will put me to sleep.
Oh, unbelievable. And you know how far back we go? That's where it happens. Watch out for the people with the knives, or those closest to you.
There
Sam,
you go.
or something like that.
Andy Kindler, always a pleasure. Thanks, buddy.
Okay, have a great weekend, man. Love you.
I love you too. Bye-bye. All right, folks. Going to head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will take your phone calls and your IMs. We'll play a little more sound. Just a reminder, you can become a member of this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Just for pennies a day, you can support this program that has been member-supported now for, 7 years and 364 days. So thank you so much to our members. Really appreciate it. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. They've been with us since day one. Check out the Michael Brooks Show on YouTube, on Patreon. This week, you should listen to about Bolsonaros in particular, because this guy is going to be a real problem, I think, for Latin America, and really, in many ways, is gives an indication of just how contagious Trump is. I think there's a very strong argument that segments of Brazil would have rejected this guy if they thought there wasn't somebody even, as ridiculous. The President of the United States really have lowered the standards here in this country. Also, check out the Antifada. You can find that at patreon.com, the Antifada. And for a real quality plug,
there's going to be a Patreon-only show this weekend.
What?
For Literary Hangover members. It's going to be a bit casual because the full show is going to come the following Saturday. So. But I'm going to read a poem by Bertolt Brecht, I think. A very depressing one. And talk about a book called Gotham. It's a history of New York. Have you heard of this book? It's a giant. It's like 70 hours long on Audible.
Wow.
Talk a little bit about that. But
no, that sounds good, though.
It's like the Power Broker, but for the colonial New York.
Interesting. And you're going to read the whole thing?
Yep, going to read the whole 70 hours. No, just going to talk about it casually a little bit. It's going to be a more relaxed thing for members. So
I see. All right.
Pontificate on some things.
Fair enough. I mean, speaking of casual, it's Casual Friday. You're wearing your shirt that is stained by your backpack. Pretty impressive. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. Oh, we do have a Reefer Cake song?
It's only 90 seconds long.
Let's hear it.
It's a diss track of Michael and Ronald Reagan, I think.
Oh, all right.
I'm gonna show you how to do it, son. I'm gonna show you how to.
With rain stop a 10-foot man at DGQ and on. So good at writing songs, it just goes on and on. They wanna work with me because my lyrics are ill. Now Ronnie thinks he can push me off that hill. If you won't debate me, I call you a bitch. And the only thing worse than a bitch is a snitch. He summons Twitter haters who gather to fight. Got a bunch of these haters tweeting at me tonight. I'm trying to calm down and bake another cake, but when the reefer cake is cornered, he bites like a snake. Brooks refused to debate, proves he was a fake. Bubble boys, don't make the same mistake. Ronald Reagan wants me to be done. Hear that everyone, he wants me to be done. I'm gonna show you how to do it, son. I'm gonna show you how to. Immigration, I think we agree. Open up the borders and set them all free. But I don't give a fuck if you're 6'3". I'm gonna call you out on hypocrisy. Dumb left is a foolish meme. Agrees to debate, so it's cool with me. Bubble boys talk about reefer cake. Ron's it for real, but Brooks is a fake. You talking shit about reefer cake, man? You best be ready. Just step in that ring, man. And when you mess with reefer cake, man, you better know. You better know. DJ QAnon knows when it hits 90 seconds, the song ends.
Bubble boys beware. I'm gonna show you how to do it, son. I'm gonna show you how to. I'm gonna show you how to do it, son. 90 seconds.
There you go. Wow, I think the gauntlet's been thrown down. I'm not 100% sure.
Something's been thrown down.
Something has been thrown down. All right, quick break. Fun half. It's the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fun half. Hey, this is super fun, and we'll get right to the phones after this. You know, back in the day, when I was on traditional radio, we would talk about crazy laws that were proposed by right-wingers in the state legislature across the country. And I remember criticism from some people like, why are you cherry-picking these guys? You know, and then about 5 or 6 years later, the law gets adopted by, 3 or 4 states. Or that politician ends up being a congressperson. Or, I don't know, the vice president of the United States. Here is, so Washington State Representative, a guy named Matt Shea. A document that was associated with him in some way. I don't know. It's a 4-page outline. It's a manifesto of sorts. I don't know did he draw this up, or he wrote this and then a local sheriff found it. And it's basically outlining, I guess you could call it a holy war that this elected state representative is planning, foreseeing. Here we go. Here's the report from local channel NBC6 in Washington State.
Statements like, you fight to win so you don't have to fight again. Make an offer of peace before declaring war. If they do not yield, kill all the males.
Pause it for a second. This is from the document. God is a warrior. You fight to win so you don't have to fight again. It's actually also, I think Machiavelli said something to that effect. Maybe Sun Tzu, too. Make an offer of peace before declaring war. And if they do not yield, kill all the males.
Kill all the males. Those are lines from a 4-page document that Spokane Valley Representative Matt Shea has taken credit for writing. And tonight, because of that document, Shea now finds himself at the center of a potential FBI investigation.
That 4-page document titled Biblical Basis for War is a radical Christian call to arms, outlining 14 steps for seizing power and what to do afterwards in explicit detail. It calls for an end to abortions and same-sex marriage, saying everyone must obey biblical law, and if enemies do not yield, quote, all males will be killed. We reached out to Shea multiple times to ask about this manifesto, contacting him on Facebook, calling his legislative offices in both Olympia and Spokane Valley, as well as his Spokane law firm. So far, he has not returned our calls, but his legislative aide did tell us that our message was being passed along to Representative Shea.
What I'm about to expose...
He did, however, post this video on Facebook in late October. In it, Shea admits to distributing the document, but calls it a summary of a series of sermons in the Old Testament, or a, quote, just war theory philosophy. Tell me what this is.
This right here is the biblical basis for war.
The manifesto, which was only given to a few people close to Shea, was made public by this man.
It is, quite frankly, one of the more horrific things I've ever read as far as somebody's agenda. I don't believe that this type of thought process has any business being in our government. And quite frankly, it just goes against the philosophy of everything that liberty is meant to be. You don't kill people because they don't subscribe to your religion. You don't advocate for that. And I think it's necessary that people understand the mindset that they would be voting for if they voted for Matt Shea.
There you go, folks. We're going to have in a couple of weeks somebody on to talk about Mike Pence, the guy who literally wrote the book on Mike Pence. And I don't know if he has done one of those like crib sheets, what do you call it, monarch notes of all the reasons why you can wage war if you're a Christian theocrat, but seems like it might be close.
Failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
There you go. You want to be able to access that stuff quickly. That makes sense to me. That makes a lot more sense. You think about it that way. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm watching Maddow on Tuesday, and she goes into a segment with Kornacki about House races. And as the segment goes on, I realize he's saying almost the exact same thing I said on the show a week earlier. The basics are Democrats need to flip 23 seats and to have a 218, 217 advantage that will give them control of the House. I said there were 18 districts that were very likely to flip, 16 Democratic and 2 Republican. He added one race to the list, and when I paused the DVR, I noticed that he had the same races listed on the big board that I had on my list, with the exception of Katie Porter, who's running in the 45th District of California against Republican incumbent Mimi Rogers. Porter's endorsed by the Progressive Change Campaign Committee and supports Medicare for all. She's a law professor and a consumer advocate and is a protege of Elizabeth Warren. Siena University is currently live polling her district and has Porter up by 2 points with 499 already polled. But the real difference between my forecast and his is that he says that there are 50 districts outside of the top 19 where there are toss-up races, and I would put that number at a much smaller 25 races. Dave Wasserman of the Cook Political Report put out a tweet on Sunday where he looked at the analysis of the 2006 and 2010 wave elections and saw that the party of the wave held all of their own lean, likely, solid districts, won 57% of all toss-ups, 19% that leaned towards the opposition party, 9% that were where the opposition party was likely to win. And if those trends continued in this election, Democrats would pick up 40 seats and would have a 235 to 200 advantage, which is 2 seats over the amount that 538 is currently predicting in their classic mode. Most aggregators have at least 18 races as being highly flippable, and Dems lead 16 to 2 for a pickup of 14 seats, so they just need 9 more seats to take the House. I'm a little concerned that the Democrats don't have more leads in polling and in individual House races, considering all the fundamentals that favor the Democrats, the historic flipping of 30 seats to the opposition party after 1914, the fact that Trump has one of the lowest approval ratings of any modern president approaching the midterms, only Truman in 46, when the Democrats lost 55 seats, W. Bush in 2006, where the Republicans lost 30 seats, Truman in 50, when Democrats lost 29 seats, were lower. Trump is at 40% approval in Gallup, 42 in 538. The generic ballot, where Democrats are up by 9.1 on 538. Given all of these factors, Democrats should have leads in more individual House races. The range of these seats Democrats are predicted to win go from 226 to 235. I definitely think Democrats will take the House, but considering the fact that mail-in ballots will be in the filing tallies in 6 races, will have a factor in the tallies in 6 races in California and in the 8th District of Washington, I think there's about a 30% chance that if the Democrats flip the House, it won't happen until about a month afterwards, because we just won't know on the day after the election because of the mail-in ballots. Do you have any comments or questions? And also, if you have time, I can give you some news on the Senate races and some governor's races.
Yeah, I want to hear about the Senate and governor races, but let me ask you this. There's 2 things. One, I share your concern about that. Like, why? And the second sort of tranche of races, right? Like, there's the first tranche where the Democrats have opened up a certain leads, and those tend to be, if I'm not mistaken, ones where you're looking at, like, so-called moderate Republicans, right? We're talking about, like, maybe maybe the people who've been disaffected by Trump. How would you characterize? Is that accurate? And how would you characterize the other tranche in terms of those districts?
It's hard to say. I mean, a lot of them actually had people retire. A lot of them did.
But those that retired tend to be more moderate Republicans, right?
Not necessarily. Like Del Isa retired. Some of them did retire. Fielinghausen was, fairly moderate. I mean, if you can call any Republican moderate. Like Leonard Lance, which is in a lower tranche, which in the 26th. He's like one of the most moderate. That's in the 7th district of New Jersey, and they just did a Siena poll that was, they had the live polling in New York, so he was down by 7. So that was one of the best results from the recent live polling. But there's just a ton of races, that are
blue state.
Go
that's what I'm saying.
way.
Like blue state. All right, so let's put it this way. Like Clinton districts. How would you characterize the other tranche of people of races? Like the electorate in those races.
Yeah, there's like 6 out of the top 24 that are actually states that Trump won. Districts that Trump won, like Iowa's 1st district. The guy Rod Blum, he's just real conservative, and Iowa is just trending towards Democrats. New Jersey's 2nd district, Frank Lambiando just decided not to run. The 2 people in Pennsylvania decided not to run, Ryan Costello and I forget the other guy's name.
Right.
But they were redistricting. They knew they couldn't win. In the 17th district, it just became more Democratic. Arizona's 2nd district, they got Ann Kirkpatrick, who's been a congresswoman before. A lot of it is just the trend that has continued from the special elections, which has been about a 11 to 12 point swing, and also there's been some recent polling where they're just polling all the top 70 districts, and if you look at from the 2016 election, there were all of those districts in head-to-head, a Republican versus Democrat, not Clinton-Trump districts. They led by 15. Now Democrats lead by 4. So that's a 19-point turnaround. So that's why I'm so confident that we're going to win in these districts. Another one is this guy, Kansas 3rd District, Kevin Yoder. He's just losing badly to Sharice Davids. Consistently losing by 10 points. The 2 in Minnesota, I think I mentioned before,
right.
3rd District.
All right.
Those.
Okay. All right. So I'm sold. The Senate and governor races. What do you think? Where are you on the chances of the Democrats picking up the Senate?
Well, I still think it's really slim, but it's getting better. Because as we're getting closer to Election Day, you're having better results from basically almost every state except for Florida, and there's a very slight difference. So you see better results in Indiana, where Donnelly's had some leads just recently within the last few days. Better results from McCaskill in Missouri. Better results from Jackie Rosen. The last 2 polls have been +3 leads over Heller, and also I think that finally we're starting to see polls that reflect all this craziness that happened last week, because obviously there's a lag period, and I think that's what's happening.
Is Tennessee out of reach now?
Yeah, I think it is. It's, I don't know. It is improving. I try to put 2 different a 2-week window and a 4-week window. So they have improved to 6 points on the 2-week window, but it's still down 6 points. Beto's last 2 polls have just been 4 and 3, so things are looking good. I mean, Digby was saying that Trump actually hurt Cruz. I mean, I think that's right. I think what hurt him more is all the bad publicity from last week. But that's
so. Where
to
does
win
if the Democrats are to win the Senate, what's going to be the race that's going to do it? Right, they're going to lose Heitkamp's race, right?
Yeah, they're gonna, even though there's one poll with under 10, but I mean, they're still gonna lose that very likely, even though she does have a lot of money to throw out.
And
but,
now with the Green candidate dropping out, or I should say endorsing Kristen Sinema, Arizona, if they win the Senate, it's going to be because they won Arizona, they win Nevada, they win Texas, and we're one short,
Texas,
right?
No, you have to hold. No, if they win all 3 of those and they hold Missouri and they hold Indiana and they hold Florida, they'll take the Democrats to 51.
So all you need is 2. If you drop all you need is 2 if you drop North Dakota.
Well, no, you need 3.
That's what I'm saying. So where do we have? Arizona, Nevada, and Texas. Okay, right. Okay.
Right.
So I see what you're saying. So, I mean, that's the way it will work. I mean, if it happens, that's what's going to happen. It's really basically about Texas, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just hoping that as the election day gets closer, there'll be some closer polls. I mean, because there's still a poll that came out that it had Cruz winning by 10 points. It's not a great poll. Some of the other ones are better, but just if that trend can continue where he's continually getting closer, I'll have a lot more hope. I mean, again, I said this about 6 months ago. Technically Mississippi with the Tad Cochran going out. That you have to hit 50%, and so if all the things go right, they will Democrats will already win. But even if they have 50-49, and like I said, Chris McDaniel and Cindy Hyde-Smith are the Republicans that are going to split the vote, and so there will be a runoff very likely on November 27th. And 3 weeks after the election, and that will determine who wins the Senate. Unfortunately, Cindy Hyde-Smith is up by 14 over Mike Espy when that does happen. And so everybody's probably going to be talking about it, but the actual odds of Democrats winning are going to be extremely small in Mississippi. So if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen, on election night or, a day or 2 afterwards if we have some close races that have to be counted.
All right, and John,
the same thing is going to happen. Okay.
We will talk to you on that election night.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, man.
Looking forward to it.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
What is this Boris Epstein?
Seema Verma, who's the what is her position? Do you know it, Brendan?
CMS director.
She had this tweet about the scariest Halloween costume, and then she got to appear on Sinclair's Bottom Line with Boris commentary to sort of talk about it.
Yeah. Now, she is an official at the Health and Human Services, right? Or what is CMS? Is the I think that's Center for, I'm sorry, she's Health and Human Services, but she is at the center. She is
current administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
She is the government, basically official of Medicare and Medicaid. On Halloween, she posted a tweet. This is the scariest Halloween costume goes to, and it's a guy wearing a T-shirt, Medicare for All. I mean, just contemplate the hostility that she has towards her own program. Stunning. And so she gets a visit to Boris Epstein on the Sinclair media empire. Boris Epstein, I wonder if she is to Medicare and Medicaid like Boris Epstein is to broadcasting. I will say, one of the few people who I think is worse at this than me. Boris Epstein. And so I hope he never goes away in some ways.
Medicare for All has become a popular slogan for many Democrats on the campaign trail. I spoke to the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Seema Verma, about whether Medicare for All is a feasible notion. Here's what she told me.
Well, as the head of the program, I deal with Medicare program day in and day out. And I can tell you that there are a lot of problems in the Medicare program. So Medicare for All is simply a bad idea. What we need to do is focus on strengthening the program. You try to expand it, that's going to really threaten the program for the people that it's supposed to serve. You know, we've heard about the price tag on this, some $32 trillion. It's not something that our country could afford, and I think it would really threaten the solvency of the program. Another area is fraud and abuse. People talk about how Medicare has low administrative costs. Well, that's because we're not doing a great job on fraud and abuse. We only review 0.5% of all the claims that are out there. So, you know, I think what we want to do is strengthen the program, make it work better for seniors, not trying to dilute its focus.
Here's the bottom line. The slogan Medicare for All may be useful to Democrats looking to fire up their base, but it is an absolutely unrealistic idea. Single-payer health care would cost way too much and would actually hurt American people throughout the country.
There you go. So first off, the lie that Medicare will be somehow diluted if more healthier people enter the risk pool is absurd. In fact, there's every reason to believe that people will have more opportunities to see more doctors if you're in Medicare now versus a program of Medicare for All, because virtually all doctors would be within the program and prices would come down. Is there Medicare fraud? Of course there is. There's also insurance fraud. Heck, one of the biggest Medicare fraudsters is running for governor of Florida. But it's true. Administrative costs are incredibly small.
Wouldn't making it a universal program sort of eat into that whole fraud part of it, though? Like,
I mean, you would presumably, there would give more opportunities. Those people who are committing fraud against insurance companies now would still commit fraud. They would just find it through a different Medicare. It's conceivable that the quality of the policies you put in place to fight fraud would get more robust because it wouldn't be so Byzantine with two different systems. But the idea that fraud with Medicare is a problem with the Medicare as opposed to the criminals is just bizarre. There's health insurance fraud in the private industry. Medicare, I think the big number that they used to throw around was like $250 billion. I'm not sure about that, but that's off the top of my head. But even still, that's not necessarily a huge number relative to the fraud in the private health insurance industry.
Her play seems to be towards seniors, to galvanize them to say, hey, if we give this to everyone, you're getting less of this pie, and it's going to compromise your health care and galvanize the most consistent voters.
That's what the administration has been pushing, and it's fascinating to me that they are this afraid of it.
She had a follow-up tweet after that Halloween one where she said, "Did I get your attention? Good. Medicare for All isn't a joke. It's a multi-trillion-dollar drain on the American economy, and that will bankrupt future generations. It's government-controlled health care that will strip choice away from millions. It's a bad idea, and it is scary."
And, of course, we've already talked about that $32 trillion number actually represents a $2 trillion savings for the American people.
That's right. That's right, overall. But they're worried about it. Let's go back to the phones. You call them from a 607 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Clay calling from Athens, across the water from Cairo.
There you go.
I was calling up. First of all, I'm a physician, and I want to talk about something else, but the relevant statistics on the fraud and all that is 30% of all medical costs in America are paperwork, and that paperwork is largely devoted to denying patients coverage for this or that, or denying reimbursements for doctors. And they've always tried to improve Medicare by cutting reimbursements to doctors, and of course also the other relevant statistic is the third leading cause of death in America is medical mistakes, and that happens nowhere else in the civilized world, or at least the Western world. And
what is that a function of? What is that a function of?
What are we talking about? The thing I last mentioned?
Yeah, like why is it that there is more that the cause of death is actually being, let's say, in hospitals higher than other Western countries?
Well, because doctors are no longer in private practice. We're my wife and I are a dying breed. They're treated like McDonald's employees. They have to see X number of patients. They're really encouraged to maximize billings and do this test or refer somebody to another doctor. And that's this diffusion of responsibility where you don't recognize the patient when you walk into the room with them. You spend 5 to 6, 7 minutes with them while you're staring at a screen filling in blanks so you can facilitate billing, and then you send them off to some other specialist who may or may not assume correctly how you've worked up this patient and neglected a relevant test or not looked at the obvious diagnosis. So just fumbles and trying to and going through the motion. Fumbles and going through the motion. That's the way I characterize it. We can talk to you about examples, but in any case, I wanted to talk to you. The phone call was motivated because I thought Digby was a lawyer up until the point where she said she wasn't a lawyer, and I was. A couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. Either your choice, originalism or fascism. What's your inclination?
Well, my inclination is always to talk about originalism in these situations, but happy to talk about fascism, whichever one you want.
Remember, while we're starting this, if Matt, I believe, if he could please look up the Wikipedia article on the Ninth Amendment, and then what motivated this is, do you remember Akil Reed Amar, the Sterling professor of law, or something like that? He's a Yale law professor. He testified at the Kavanaugh hearings. He said how he wrote a letter of recommendation for Kavanaugh because they were both originalists, and the distinction was he was a liberal, whereas Kavanaugh was a conservative, but they were both originalists, and
And then he withdrew it, I think. Right.
Well, and he was he was on again on NPR on Point, and he was saying the same things where he says that what all that matters is in interpretation of the law is history plus the text. The text is the text, and this gets back to when you have logic. If you're making an argument and you don't defer to logic or reason, you violate the laws of reason in reaching your conclusion. That's sophistry, and in law. It's the same idea. Any interpretation of the law that doesn't defer to, ethics, defer to fairness and reason is Phariseeism, right? So But in any case, read the it's one sentence, the Ninth Amendment. Read it.
Off the top of my head, it's about rights that are and any rights that are not. Oh, I'll read it. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. That is,
right.
That's interpreted by some as being like rights that are specifically of the state. I mean, so the idea is that just because the Constitution addresses certain rights does not mean that it is exhaustive in its list of rights that people have.
Right, and it says it should not be designed to deny or denigrate that right. So, and in keeping with, and I mentioned the Declaration of Independence in this context, and not just exclusively referencing the Constitution, because we'll proceed to next. But the idea is any, in terms of Enlightenment ethics, any behavior that is not unethical is a right. Right? That's the whole idea of freedom and pursuit of happiness and everything else that's generated in it. Now Google now search.
I mean, I don't know if that's accurate, though. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily accurate.
I think it is. I think it is. I mean, I think it is, but you can argue differently. But in any case, Google down or search down for Scalia and his comment upon that.
Well, so let's get to the
So the point is any interpretation of law, of whether it's unconstitutional or not, is based upon the principles, the Enlightenment ideals, ethics upon which the Revolutionary War was fought, as elucidated by the Declaration of Independence. But look at Scalia's characterization of that quote. He says that just because it says we can't denigrate or abrogate those laws, it doesn't mean we can't. It's totally opposite interpretation of any reasonable interpretation. Do you find the Scalia reference in the article?
No, I can't. If you're going to assign me reading, you're going to have to do so in advance. I can't right now go and find the article, the articles that you're talking about.
Oh, I thought that was Matt's raison d'etre, reason for being.
Tell me about it. But
the point of it is originalism is ideological.
Of course. I mean, look, there's a much easier way to make this argument. It's like, you don't know. Like the original text, it's absurd because the idea that a constitution...
Yes, in general, and in particular, I agree with you. It's absurd. But the point of it is that it's Phariseeism. Instead of deferring to ideas of fairness and reason and justice, you defer to this ideological mode of analysis, which is, as you say, a shibboleth, imaginary. But in general, it's instead of basing your arguments on the rules of logic, you base it on, some sort of conservative ideology.
Well, it's also like it's there. We see this all the time that it's interpreted. Right? Like the idea that there's no interpretation that goes into the Constitution is absurd. The idea that these guys can divine the intent. I mean, the Constitution was written specifically.
In general, I agree with you. It's internally inconsistent and it's externally inconsistent. It is not the idea that you're going to base a law, interpret a law.
Right.
Based
I gotta
on
go.
Anything
I gotta jump.
But
you're right. We're in agreement. We're in agreement. We're in agreement. Originalism is, it's basically it's a fundamentalism, and it has as much monopoly on the truth as religious fundamentalism does. And no one would design a constitution that has that level of rigidity if they wanted it to be durable. It's just absurd. I mean, and these are also the same people who, you know, the originalism, like remember, they're not even like going by the text, like the textualists. There's textualists who think that they can divine, you know, but will still say there's a right to bear arms, even if there's not a well-regulated militia, or you know, originalists who try to divine. There's a reason why it's called divine the original intent. There's a modality of thought that is similar to libertarianism, where it's like there is some truth that is out there, and we're just going to find, you know, the best example I could use is when we were talking to, what's his name? The guy we just replayed, Walter Block, when it was like, wait a second, your property rights. If property rights are uber alles, why don't we respect the property rights? If they precede, if they're a natural right, how do you justify us living on land that would have been, under your notion of property rights, belong to Native Americans? Well, we're going to start with the concept of property that the French had when we landed here. Wait, what? Those aren't natural rights in that instance. You're just deciding when we're going to start to pay attention to certain man-made constructs arbitrarily based upon what ends up putting you in the driver's seat. And that's what originalism is as well. It is a completely arbitrary pronouncement that, oh, I have access to the original intent. And so it's the original intent. I don't have to argue.
Yeah, it's fundamentalism shifted from the Bible to the Constitution.
Yeah,
it is. It's a belief system. Yeah, there's a good quote in a M+1 piece that I like, which is, the Constitution governs not because it's intrinsically good, true, or beautiful. It isn't. It governs because it is an institution in the form of a document in which we, the people, agree would not evolve. For Scalia, having a rock is a lot better than not having a rock, and that's the originalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like, you know, what the institution determines it's going to mean at any given point. And the idea of legal thought is to basically provide, the best metaphor I can give you is like, you have a spine, and doctors say that if you take an x-ray of most people's spines, they are all structurally damaged on some level. But what's important is the functional strength, the muscles you have around your back, around your spine, throughout your body, sort of hold it in place. And in many ways, like, legal thought and legal convention is designed to maintain the integrity of the structure. And that's why, like, when you see the Supreme Court do stuff like they did in 2000, where it's like, what? You're starting to see, like, the functionality, the functional strength break down. And it starts to uncover some of the weakness that exists structurally. The Constitution is not like, you don't go to it and get all the answers from the Constitution. It's why you have a body of judges who interpret it. And why they have the ability to disagree is because it's not an oracle that just you drop your question in a bucket. It goes down to the bottom of a well and the answer comes up in, you know, somebody down there puts their answer in a bucket and it comes back up.
Why did we move away from the oracle method?
I mean, I don't know that we have. It's just that we went to one that's a little bit more ideological. calling from a 615 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Matthew. I'm calling from Nashville.
Hello, Matthew. What's on your mind?
Well, gearing up to do a couple more door-knocking sessions for Phil Bredesen here before the vote comes in. And, God, the first thing you see whenever you wake up this morning is a new ad of his where he's, thumping his chest about how whenever George Bush called on him to send troops to the border in 2006, he didn't wait to ask questions. He was right there. And, obviously this guy is better than Marsha Blackburn. There's no question about that. But just kind of wondering about what your thought is on maybe the tack we should take with Bredesen. Should he get into office, or more generally, it's kind of a Manchin situation,
Right.
Okay, we're going to get judges and whatnot, but this guy's a healthcare executive. That's how he made his fortune. He's not going to be somebody that's going to be up there stumping for Medicare for all. I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but I guess overall what I hope is a story that comes out of this election is that, having built some of these structures, I didn't vote in the 2016 election. I didn't think it really mattered. I was in Tennessee. It's going to go for Trump, but it's like maybe we can build some structures to hold some of these people accountable. If we can get Bredesen in, I know how Bob Corker is going to react when I call him with constituent concerns. But, at least with Bredesen, there will be some accountability there. And so I just, I want to encourage everybody to go out there, even if it is a Manchin or a Bredesen, because, the slide to fascism is real, and God help us if we don't win something next week.
Right.
So,
I mean, the idea with the Bredesen is really just you want to stop Trump for the next 2 years. And then you are hoping to get more Democratic pickups who can provide more progressive ballast. I mean, that's basically it, right? Bredesen only is, empowered when Democrats have 50 or 51 or 52 or up to 60, seats.
Right.
And he's going to be a problem. But it's what's the option? I don't want to go after.
The other thing is,
people understand this intrinsically. You're being chased by, the bad guys, and you come to a cliff, and there's a ravine, a deep ravine, and there's a rickety bridge that you got to go across. You got one or two choices. You take the bridge.
Yep. So, everybody get out there and canvass. And, one last thing is if we can, here in Tennessee, we have not expanded Medicaid or Medicare, and we can make a real difference in people's lives. So please, anyone who's listening, get out there and vote. And thanks for the show, guys. Left is best.
Thank you,
and
Matthew.
Michael's very antagonistic to the callers. Bye.
Bye. He certainly is. That's why we put him on the bench today. Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this?
Sam, this is Jay.
Jay from Connecticut.
Hey, man. Well, yeah, I usually say from New Haven.
All right, Jay from New Haven. Right, okay.
Hey.
Sorry, buddy.
I was really
didn't mean to
tickled.
answer your phone. What?
I say I was really tickled to hear you are notching 8 years of continuous podcasting today or tomorrow. It seems like it was much longer, frankly, but I mean that in a good way. But a lot has really changed in this past 8 years. I remember when I was always trying to help you find a position on radio back then. Now that seems so quaint.
Yes.
If you look at how things have turned out.
Initially, I was hoping that this show could get picked up on radio, and longtime listeners will remember in 2013 or 14, maybe it was the summer of 2014, I got offered a 3 to 6 position on radio by a guy whose name I will not say, Ron Hartenbaum. And
the guy who wasn't going to pay you.
Well, initially the deal was this: you're not going to get paid for 90 days. We're partners. You're not going to get paid for 90 days, but we've got ads coming in. And then, about 30 days into it, he said, so the show is sustainable. We can definitely continue to do this, but you will not get paid until January. And it was like June when he told me this. And I'm working, I'm doing this show, and then I'm like running, literally running, like about 10 blocks north to go into a studio and do 3 hours of radio, and then going home, completely fried. I was getting into it. I enjoyed it, but there was no way I was going to do it for 6 months of no pay, not even back pay. This was not a deferral situation. And I go, this is not sustainable. And he was like, oh, no, it's sustainable. We can continue to do this. And I said, that's because you're not paying me.
And he's not doing it.
And so I said, I'm going to have to go off. And then basically he told all of the affiliates that I had gone crazy. He basically told them all that
I got the wind of that, and I pulled a lot of my investments at that time too. No offense.
Oh, I understand.
But I'm surprised you're not playing the greatest hits. Oh, I guess Matt wouldn't know where to look for stuff, but a greatest history of bloopers or something.
We were hoping that someone would put them together, Jay.
Yeah, that must be where Michael is today. He's at home editing.
No, I didn't even realize it was our birthday until I came in and Kyle had texted me.
My favorite bit was when the one of your guys called in and pretended to be Chris Rose, and that I think
that was Kyle
staying power.
Yeah, that was quite good.
Oh, Kyle did that.
Yep, and the best was when we had Chris Rosen come on with his impersonator, and Rosen thought it was him being played back to him. He didn't realize it was an impersonation.
Yeah, that's what Howard Stern does to Tan Mom. I think that's what he probably stole the idea from you.
Yeah, probably.
Now that I think of it.
Well, Jay, it's been great reminiscing.
Taking a stroll down memory lane. Yeah.
Thanks for the call, buddy.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye. Let's go to 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, this is Jeff in Georgia. Pleasure
Jeff in Georgia. All the greatest hits today.
Yeah, man, I know. Hey, I was not aware that callers could just call you up and tell you to do their bidding. So listen up, son.
I got completely hoodwinked. I was like, oh, okay. Wait. I got to go down and I'm supposed to be doing research for your point here. Now.
I mean, I thought that was the thing, though. I mean, I was going to tell you, listen, I'm going to be in Brooklyn on February the 1st to see Michael's show. So if you're looking for an excuse not to meet me, then you're going to need to start thinking of something real good like right now.
Well, I definitely won't be there, but I definitely will not be there. But I would, hopefully you will come into studio. But I have to say this. Now, look, the other day was Halloween. Not sure if you were aware of that, Jeff. And during, we had some mishap in the fun half of the program. Where,
you don't say.
Well,
you don't say.
Look, you're dealing with a lot of electrical wires in a studio like this, a lot of cables, and something happened. And then for a moment, and fortunately, I don't want to get to the backstory of this, but there was a remedy for this. But the show turned into something that was completely different. And we got a phone call during the course of that show, when that was ostensibly from me. Now, I want to tell everybody that was not me who called in. And I think, people who paid a lot of attention could tell that was not me. But that was, I don't know in real time if it was the funniest part of the show. There were other funny parts of the show. That call was very funny. The funniest part of the show came from somebody who felt that they were being mocked by the show, who thought that the show... All right, well, stop being so obtuse. So we did a fake version of the show, a fake version of the show. I hate to break it down to people, and I played sort of a sidekick to Michael's version of a show of, I wouldn't call it the Dumb Dumb Left. I would just call it the Dum Dums. And in one of the, I wasn't aware of the show. I didn't realize it existed until somebody, I got caught up in a Twitter argument about it. And for people who don't know, you called in and did an impression of me. And the only downside is it sort of sat on the joke where my character was going to make fun of me in some fashion. But some other show thought it was real, and that Michael got very uncomfortable when I was being made fun of, which shows a fundamental lack of understanding about what happens on this show. There was nothing that Michael would want more than to entertain a call making fun of me, but he was trying to be in character and apparently ushered it off. But this guy thought, do you have the video? I can't remember the name of the show.
The video has been delisted the last time I looked at it.
Oh, no, he delisted it because it made him look like an idiot. Oh, no, did someone grab it? Son of a gun. That is so upsetting. That is so upsetting. So this guy, what's the name of him? What's
Progressive Soapbox, I believe.
Okay, so Progressive Soapbox. Apparently this guy thought it was real, and didn't occur to him, like, why is Michael wearing a fedora? Why is he wearing glasses for the first time ever? And why is Sam, and I don't think he knew it was me, or maybe he did, why is Sam in a closet with a light shining on his face, not wearing his glasses? And he thought that I had signaled. Did he think that I signaled, or he didn't know who I was? I mean, and the whole thing is making fun of how dumb they are. Somebody keeps trying to call me here. How dumb they are. Hello? Did I accidentally answer that phone? Who's this?
Hi, is this Matt?
No, you have the wrong number. You got to stop calling this number, please.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Now I don't know if I'm still connected with Jeff and Georgia.
I don't think that would have been from me.
But so I'm going to tell the story, Jeff. If I'm not there anymore, I apologize. I kept getting called by this person, and they ruined the call. And hold on, I can resume that call. Are you still there, Jeff? Jeff, you still there?
Hey,
sorry about that. And so
yes, I'm still here.
So the guy who we were not necessarily making fun of him, but making fun of people who are dumb and have a YouTube show, did not realize the whole thing was a parody. I mean...
Yeah, first of all, I just have to say, I'm still in absolute shock that people did not realize that was me at the time.
Well, no, your voice was very different.
I thought it was so obvious.
Your voice was very different. But...
I thought it was...
But the idea that somehow we were upset by this, by that call, was hilarious. And I guess the guys, they listed the video, but it sort of proved our point in our way. Like, the idea that
that is exactly what I was thinking, actually. Because, like when you do a parody of these people, of course, like the only thing that they're going to latch onto is, of course, like, if you do the parody in the parody, right? Like, they don't fucking get it. They're like, oh, look, he's calling in and he's making fun of the fact that Sam says vote blue no matter who. No, dude, I love Social Security. So does Sam. Yeah, Republicans are going to kill it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is all a joke, man. And there's just total obtuseness with this guy. The fact that like he just did not understand what he was saying, and literally his comments are filled with people saying exactly this.
It was so
like,
funny.
Look,
Well, you
man,
had to
like,
turn
I don't
the
even like the show. I know what he's talking.
Take the video down. I mean, it just goes to prove our point. They don't even do the slightest bit of homework. Not even the slightest bit. Jeff, I appreciate the call. Sorry, get a jump, buddy.
I appreciate you. A happy birthday to you, Majority Report.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, folks, I'm sorry. We're really behind the gun. I'm going to have time for one more phone call. Somebody sent the, great. Somebody actually did pull down the video. Maybe we will make fun of that later. But, all right, let's take a couple IMs. I'll take one more call, and then we got to get going. Ashta Congle, I'm at work now, not seeing the show live, but I just wanted to write in to thank Jamie for constantly reminding us that another world is possible. As someone who has suffered from severe depression and anxiety, it's really only through remembering the fact that I can get out of bed in the morning. I have been listening to this show going on 4 years, and I have to say this is the best crew yet. Thanks to all of you. Solidarity, Jamie. Thank you. Old school, new rules. Please get O'Reilly's on the soundboard. Yeah, let's pull that. Secret identity politics. Dennis Miller trying to explain his conversion to conservatism took about as long as it took De Niro to die at the end of Heat. Spoiler for Heat. It's not very good, indeed. We span. Remember when Methed Out Guy made Alex Jones uncomfortable at the bar with Milo trying to sell him on InfoWars music? Well, unfortunately, I can't accost you in a bar while hopped up on amphetamines, but I do want to say Majority Report music is going strong. Also, I'm from Spokane, where Matt Shea is, and he is such a joke. Even our Republican sheriff turned on him. Ask the moms. Left his best. Space Hand Day. Armed individual in the high school behind my house in Aurora, Colorado, District 6. May have small impact here, despite a lot of early voting. Gosh. Hold on 1 second. Dumpster fire. Are we stuck with Trump as a big part of our politics until he dies? We're stuck with Trump even if he passes away, folks. This is not going to go away, I'm afraid. Sizzle Chest. The caller is a snooze. Producer Lauren, I understand Dennis Prager on the same talk network as Hugh Hewitt and noted Messianic Jew Michael Medved. And doesn't Joe Piscopo precede Hewitt on New York radio? Very well may. JJ Cool. Hey, Sam, it's good to see your face looking back to normal today. Do you have a Jeb Bush cup, though? Is there a confession you'd like to make? Not in color. There's a reason why Gillum and Jealous were 10 points down in their primary polls prior to the vote, but ended up winning their races. Everyone should keep in mind that most polling uses a likely voter model. Campaigns that excite new large blocks of constituents do not fit neatly into the typical polling models. You may be right. You may be right, but you may be right. James O'Keefe, I got paid volunteers to mimic. Okay. O'Keefe. All right. Yeah. Left Master. Hey, Sam, sorry about the language of the day. Been in my defense. The word smacking biatch can be heard on TC and PG. By the way, I don't understand it. Yemeni villain out canvassing. Got 8 family members to vote Gillum, too. This show has really inspired me to do my part. Good for you. Thank you. 3 more. Great leap forward. Midterms. I have real concerns. Everyone's touting massive early voting. I see nothing other than Republican advantage. I can't see Florida going for Gillum based on early voting. As with Georgia, we'll see. There's some truth to that. Early voting, we just don't know, though. Folks, I'm sorry. We don't have time for any more calls. I'm sorry. We're doing a pre-tape, and we just don't have the time. DX Full, I thought Andy was funnier and wilder on Stephanie Miller's Happy Hour podcast, but that's my opinion. Bak. Vote for Victoria Jackson. And the final IM of the week. If the Democrats don't win the Senate, is there any value in it being 50-50, enforcing Pence to vote on everything? Every little bit helps. All right, folks. See you Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. kicking, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted